There's a public hearing on 9A. So that'd be 10A and B.
Correct.
Sorry. I don't know anything.
Probably, are you in,
I'm on
YouTube? Yeah,
Has it done that before?
yeah. So as soon as you're done, you need to close it out.
So I should ask if anyone wants it read.
Well, the public hearing is just a closeout. That's just, nothing needs to be done with that. He just
Yeah,
has
it's
to do
10A
it.
and B.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're pretty sure nobody's gonna want it read in full.
No, we-
We've been through that.
I always feel a little bit guilty about this because really don't, I really want them as my title only because I'm the one who has to. Okay, I think it's something.
Yeah, I think I got everything wrong. Those other, that other, tray of burgers is in that cooler looking thing that's by the dishwasher.
If they need a little more cheese.
There's a door, and I think if you look, I think it's two really cool for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like you have to. It's a theater in Long Beach. Yeah, no, they only have one.
And it's pretty cool because they have like couches and everything in there. Kind of, yeah, it's pretty cool. But anyways, look through that before, because I think there's 2 coupons for movies. It's on the top, right? Like, where, you know, the rail coming wood? They were on the floor. Okay, it's that drawer right there. in the left side. Yeah, it is now. There should be one more. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Oh, do you like that? Yeah. That one, I put it in Portland somewhere. Yeah, yeah. Love you. You guys have a good time. Bye-bye.
Were you here all day today? Okay, good, because I felt like I didn't see it. City council vacation. What do you have?
Nothing. Matthew has.
Why didn't you zoom in?
Matthew's talking about.
Why didn't you zoom in? Makes them feel better that you're here.
Yeah.
Support. Yeah, I didn't feel like I saw you all day.
I'm excited for this weekend.
I know.
Do you have to work till 5?
I don't know how comp time works, but I have a lot of comp time hours.
Oh, you get with approval of.
Uh-huh.
You can use the comp time.
And is it 1 to 1 hour or is it?
No, your comp time, well, it gets accrued as 1.5 hours.
Okay.
So whatever it shows on there, it's
Okay.
accrued as.
Because I have that, I'm going to that Ireland trip
Oh, yeah.
and he just said to me one time that I could use that. I don't really need it.
Yeah.
Because I'm still getting my other paycheck too.
You could use your like. For tonight,
I'm gonna leave.
leave early and then,
Well, it depends on Austin and you guys too. I wouldn't want to use it if you guys can all leave early.
well, Eric thinks he can get off early and I can too.
Talk to Austin. He was on call. Did you hear that? When he decided to do all the, he's like,
Oh,
"Hey,
did
well, next, I'm on call." No, because they're all gone. So he got Jamie to cover. Super nice of him. But yeah, it worked out.
where they all gone to? Training?
No, they're on vacations.
Oh.
Can't remember Austin said, but I don't really always pay
Something
attention.
major happened when you come back.
Yeah. Or they could deal with it from a distance. It's not. That's what I told him. I said, if we need, we can, if we only get to stay one night and come back the next day, then we do. He's like, but I want to float the river. Well, that's what he's looking forward to. And
There's a hike into that pool. You walk in and you go down and there's like a pool of water. Up there.
the Icicle Creek area.
Yeah, we should do that.
Well,
So-
I need to know ahead of time if I bring. I need to bring my hiking boots. You need to let me know. He really wants to float the river.
River at Leavenworth, which river?
Yeah. It's I think it's Northern. I think.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah,
I want to go to that little distillery again.
Is
All
that-
those little miniature.
Well, do you think they're still open?
They have
Somebody told me that they closed.
Really?
But I don't know. Eric and I were talking about that and he's like, I doubt it.
Yeah, what was it like blue something?
I have skipped 3 camping trips.
Any to the beach?
Tillamook.
Oh, Tillamook. You can go to the cheese factory and get me some cheese curds.
I don't know why they don't sell those at the store. They're so popular.
see how many of them make it home.
They're still there. It says it's still there.
Kind of like some cheese.
I wonder if they have that air. Mine all the time.
Oh, I saw them somewhere.
Pictures. You had just came. And I was sitting in the back door as you were.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, Mel's like, oh, they just asked where you were.
Yeah, we needed my dinner date.
Was it good? Was the dinner good this time?
Yeah, it's good.
I had to tell them last time, it wasn't so good. That lasagna that got overcooked.
That was kind of a different one.
So he was very, I think he emailed me 4 times, like, do you want this or this?
Oh, is that
He was super careful this time.
There's attention.
Uh-huh. Were they? Well, I got Lilo's lined up for your first one in September. Lilo's.
We'll stop there
You know
for
what?
lunch.
We should try smoke rings.
I have a call into them. And then they haven't responded yet. And a call into Casa. I was
Yeah,
trying to do more variety.
Right, Rita.
The what? The Verde ones?
Dave and I'll be happy.
Yeah,
They're not spicy, so like.
Yeah.
There are things that are exciting. I was told like, if I want to make a comment about something, there's a comment period.
There's an audience participation.
Is that what it's
They'll-
called?
Yes, they'll call and ask if there's any audience members. Like,
Before, is that earlier and
it is early in the agenda.
good, good. No, it would be a short,
Okay.
okay.
Yes, so when the mayor asks, you just go ahead and raise your hand.
Raise your hand.
Mhm.
Okay. It's like school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Airplane.
Did you have to reset your password today?
I haven't since I've been here. Will it tell me that I need to?
Just came through on your 90 days or whatever.
I think so.
It always, mine always comes through when I'm gone.
Yeah. mine
Yeah, you
was
can't do it
one
remotely.
and
Yeah.
it's remotely, and I think it's
Man,
someone else.
So I'm kind of trying to remember that I updated or changed it just before I go somewhere.
Mine is, if it's 90 days, mine is gonna happen when I'm gone. So then you have to contact IT. I'll be out of the country. Huh?
They get back, you know, get her.
Oh, yeah, but I'll be able to.
It's a luxury. I can't call it IT.
Okay,
To the same password.
bad area right there.
change some, yeah.
I'm up, my password's like this long
Yeah.
right now. Hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Start chopping up, not redoing.
Volunteer. Habitat for Humanity, but. Been drag racing.
No, we're not talking about
Matters. One in the class. So, you know, it's one of the blind squirrel things. There's no skill involved, it's still a lot. Hi, Brian.
Yeah.
I should say.
No, this is a lot.
I was worried I would be worse, like.
Yeah, sounds just like.
Finding my yard had been
Right, yeah, you told me
Yeah.
that.
So I got a lot more. Then I'm out there. Now it's true.
So good that.
So I figured, okay, let's just go slow these up. Like, just trying to finish wrapping.
No. Why not? Try to keep moving on that, you.
He's what?
Yes, got a daughter. And she's gonna make him, maybe that's something.
When's the last time you've seen my son? He must have been a few months old. They're both exhausting. Might be flirting with that line.
Get those allergies under control.
Taking a Zyrtec today.
Yeah.
Hey, Connie. Oh, that would have been good.
Oh, I still wish I could say yes. Someday I'm gonna be able to say yes. Well, then, you're number 2 of construction. Yeah, 2 contract, 1 in the.
That's what everybody.
Now.
She got more tan is what happened.
Every town here.
I'm out in the sun.
Storm and slip project on the 5 years ago. All dogs
Is that where we went that one time? Did we go by where she goes?
Really?
Okay. Okay, we were close. Yeah, we went down that goat trail to get down. I was wearing Birkenstocks, I think. That was not a very good idea. It was not a good,
I didn't follow that.
but don't be saying that now. No, don't be saying you didn't fall. Now you're gonna fall on our neck. I know. She's good at falling. She just tucks and rolls and doesn't back up like that. It's the look. I remember that. As people coming at us, the look of shock on their face. Probably, and you. No. Yeah.
They talk about when you get a waiver for homesteading. We've done it. I don't think we're submitted the application. So hopefully,
What was that? Sorry. I was watching Tom.
Well, you know, everybody knew it was gonna be a long, private.
And everybody. The holidays and finally got to meet.
Everyone's cabin.
Hey, John. God, I thought that was what I need. Well, that sounded pretty important. Okay. All right. So.
So my mother-in-law's cabin, the creek goes right by, this is from the deck. This is my daughter and her two friends.
Everybody.
It's a nice spot to go in the summer. Trout Lake. So, you know, the little creek that runs through. Have you ever been up there to that cafe? She has a cabin right on that creek. Yeah.
Yeah.
She brings those up here.
I looked into it further after our meeting. Because I sensed you weren't on board.
Someone
And
would bogart, wish someone wouldn't bogart the,
That's my coffee. I'll share it with you.
And
Just this one.
sort of tie it in.
Matthew told me this is his coffee pot.
Oh, can get you your own coffee pot. If you need your own.
For the rules.
Somebody needs to teach them to share.
But we should talk about it. We have to figure out what makes the most sense for us. But we have wide latitude.
I'll just cover all bases and be nice to everybody.
On the basis of the point. And so if somebody gets up there and praises, like, let's say we have a general rule that says no personal comment.
Oh,
That means no good. Oh. Thank you so much for helping these orphans. Done. Can't, as soon as we hear personal. Well, I mean, you get to pick. You can't do both. You allow them both, or you don't allow them both.
Ready,
They're
sir.
an extreme from one another. That's the way.
Oh, I was never.
Constitution.
Oh.
So yeah, red shirt, second row on the left. Or-
Said she's on.
going.
so sure she-
No, I asked her if she needs.
No, grocery outlet.
Seems like, sure.
Hi, Jonathan. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. Happy Monday.
Same to you.
This gentleman named Richard.
Swap them out.
Wow. 4 ties, my God, I don't do ties.
Yeah, you bent to the popular will though and put a jacket on. Look
Well, I'm
good.
wearing a jacket every time, but no ties. Appreciate that.
Sure are. No, it might be from last time, but you know, it's all yours. No, they're very good about taking care of us.
Ready.
So just FYI. Hey, Darcy.
Just so you know.
Then Darcy.
Oh, very
Hmm, that's nice. How do you know? Oh.
Sure. Yeah, forget to.
Mhm. I thought maybe there was.
Yes.
That's actually new plan.
Planning tech? Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
It's 5:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome everyone to the July 24th, 2023 City Council meeting. And I'd like to ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Counselor Long. Present. Counselor McLaughlin.
Present.
Counselor Runyon.
Present.
Counselor Randall.
Present.
Counselor Richardson.
Present.
Mayor May.
Present. Item 3 is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to call on Council Member Dan Richardson to please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Some of us before the meeting had quite a debate about the Pledge of Allegiance, about whether there should be a comma after the word God. I'd just like to let everyone know that there's been 3 renditions of the Pledge of Allegiance. The first 2 did not have a comma, but the rendition that was altered in 1954 does in fact have no comma, I should say, after the word God. So we're not going to make that announcement every council meeting, but I thought a little fun fact on the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, item 4 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Counselor Long and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5 is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not appear on the agenda later. Up to 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. To help us, in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, there is a 5-minute clock to help you stay within the 5-minute limit. I'll try to alert you as to when you have 30 seconds remaining. Is there anyone, well, I'd like to call on Connie Cromrick to be the first one to address the city council, former member of the beautification committee. Please come forward. Please give us your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Connie Crumrick. I live at 123 West 13th Street. And as the mayor said, I recently stepped down after 4 years as a member of the City of the Dalles Beautification Committee. My number one reason for joining the committee in 2019 was litter issues. I had begun participating in cleanups, which were organized by Blue Zones. When Blue Zones terminated their programming in February of 2020, I approached the city manager about taking over sponsorship of the programs for, regularly cleaning up litter. And the city was not interested in doing that, citing legal and staffing concerns. So thankfully, Gorge Toyota Honda, Rachel and Aaron Carter stepped up and assumed the role of anchor sponsor. They purchased vests, gloves, provided staff and vehicles for picking up litter bags, did a lot of promotion, social media, developed posters to go around town, and created a simple legal waiver. And I want to give thanks to the Dalles Disposal because they have offered to take 2 pickup loads of litter at each of the cleanups. The beautification committee was designated as a co-host for the cleanup events and has purchased grabbers. I've acquired the cleanup bags from ODOT and Freebridge Brewery. And the city's done advertising, purchased radio ads. I did awareness lessons in all 3 of the elementary schools around litter issues. Since October 2020, there have been 25 Second Saturday cleanups, which run March through November. 530 people have attended. Many of these were repeats. And there were between 6 and 35 people at each of the 25 cleanups. Rachel Carter and I recruited 1 or more guest hosts for each of the cleanups. In the report that I turned in that all of you have, I listed the 25 organizations which have participated, businesses and other groups since the cleanups began. I also listed the 11 sites that we've cleaned up, many of them multiple times. For instance, there have been 13 cleanups on West Sixth Street. I have participated in 23 of these cleanups, and I believe I have a really keen sense of the state of litter in our community. And I want to thank every person and group that has participated. And special thanks to the Carters, because their leadership is what really has allowed thousands of pieces of litter to be picked up in our community, countless thousands of pieces. But I feel that we need to do more. And an idea that I took to the beautification committee was that the city develop and adopt a street program. And I was met with enthusiastic response to come here tonight and propose this idea to our city leadership. Rachel Carter did approach a few of the city leaders and the beautification committee, asking for more help, more support around cleanup issues. And I've come to believe that the most effective litter abatement programs are city government-led programs. I listed the cities, at least some of the cities in the state of Oregon, which have adopted street programs as ways to facilitate connecting citizens to the city government, individuals, families, businesses, organizations, and institutionalizing the running of these programs through the city government, which makes them sustainable, which I think is really the issue, having sustainable programs. So I thank you for your time, and I will be taking these thoughts back to the beautification committee. So hopefully they'll give this some serious consideration, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie. We've always appreciated your efforts on the beautification committee. You've been a real guiding force, not only on the cleanups and the litter, but also many other projects that have been initiated by the beautification committee. So we thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Russ Brown, would you like to come forward?
Russ Brown, 903 East 14th Street, Dalles, Oregon. Then a month and a half or so ago, I'm sure.
Russ, can you talk into the microphone? There. Thanks.
Anyway, I was in a month and a half ago and asked the council to gather statistics on the property crimes, including car theft in the Dells. And the portion of that the city police maintains is probably take about 10 minutes to gather. But I've been led to believe that the district attorney's office has been less than forthcoming with the portion of the request that deals with how the arrests were dealt with. If there's no consequences, there's no deterrent. And I guess I could get that information myself, but Freedom of Information Act is kind of a joke, because if you don't have a pocket full of money, you can't get any information. You guys can get it for free, and I'd really like you to move ahead and find out what's happening to the property crime people that are committing the property crimes. I think this is all part of our police situation. We haven't had full police staff here for probably 3 years, and we've lost 5 officers. And I think that I've asked HR for the results of the exit interviews from the police officers that are leaving, and told that I can't have them because it's a personnel issue. But if the names are redacted, it's just stuff. And I certainly hope you're able to get that information, because there's a serious problem here with police and you can't fix that problem if you don't know what it is. I certainly hope that that information is available to you. I'm going to talk to an attorney and see if it's not available to me too as well without the names. But I encourage you to get as much information as you can in dealing with this police problem or lack of police problem. Probably doesn't bother you guys any because you haven't had anything stolen. I haven't either, but a buddy of mine lost his pellet barbecue. It's over $600. He's a block and a half from my house. 2 friends lost their cars. Crime problem's not getting any less. We're spending money accommodating the homeless and we're not spending enough money to recruit and maintain adequate police. I think if we don't deal with it pretty soon, you'll all get to experience some of the crime that's in town. That's it. Thanks. Got any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, sure. I had a couple of questions, but you go ahead first.
thank you very much. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
I encourage you to submit a public records request with the request that
Money. Last time I submitted a public information request, I got half of what I asked for and it cost me $225. I could do it. It's not that I don't have the money, but you can get the information for free.
I was speaking not on the issue that you had initially come up about, but I was speaking with respect to that personnel information that you had requested from the Human Resources Department. And so if you'd like to submit a public records request to my office,
I don't know where your office is or who you are. I have no idea. I've been told by your HR person that it's not available. And if the only avenue I have of maybe getting it is getting an attorney, I think it's important information for you. You should absolutely insist on having that information because like I said, you can't fix the problem if you don't know what the problem is.
sure. I'm the city attorney.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
I got a name tag and everything.
You do? Yeah, I don't pay attention to those.
No, they don't usually mean much.
I-
In your case, they mean that I'm the person who decides whether you can see those records. And so if you submit a public records request, and my office is right next to Izetta's, and you can get it, and I know you know where that is. And so please, you can get it online as well. Submit one online.
How much money will it cost me?
That is determined on a case-by-case basis. We charge a very modest fee. Very modest. It's $25 per hour of staff time. For most requests, we waive it for the first hour, especially for easy to find records.
Okay.
It's not
I'll
a
do it.
commitment.
I'll do
If
it.
you pay us some money, it doesn't mean that you get the records. It means that you'll pay for the staff time to go try to find the records.
That should be pretty easy. I mean, think about it. An exit
Yeah.
interview, it's laying there on a piece of paper. I don't.
Having not seen your request, I can't tell you whether it's easy or not.
I can
Okay.
I can understand why the human resources director would tell you that it's off limits. It's a very confidential document.
If there's
but I
a
can't-
name attached to it, certainly.
Let me finish, okay? I can assure you that the city manager knows full well what's in those reports, and I know what's in those reports because I asked the city manager about them. And you allude to a problem. I wouldn't necessarily assume that just because someone leaves the police department through either taking another job or retiring, automatically assumes that there is a quote problem, end quote. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but just when somebody leaves, I mean, people leave their jobs all the time. It's not necessarily related to a problem within the department. But I know what's in those reports because I asked the city manager, and the city manager knows full well what's in those exit interview reports. Council Runyon, do you have a question?
Early on in what you were talking about, I was thinking you were more interested in those, what happened to those who were apprehended? Because without consequence, it continues. Is that a primary?
The police report obviously is a stroke away.
Mhm.
No big deal finding out how many arrests there were for how many crimes. But when it goes to the district attorney's office, there's no consequences at that level.
Right.
Creates my way of thinking. If I was a police officer, I had a district attorney that wouldn't prosecute who I arrested. Be a little depressing. I think all of this is information that you need to have get us a adequate police.
So that's not the only thing, but it's at the top of your list is what's happening to those folks who are committing crimes to our citizens. Thank you.
Have you asked the district attorney about that? Or what, you mentioned a $225 bill? What was,
I put a public information request regarding a street sweeper a couple, 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago.
Hmm.
And I got maybe half of what I asked for, and it cost me $225 for that information. So I have a kind of a sour taste in my mouth as far as the public information request goes.
like our city attorney invited you to give it another shot.
I'll be in tomorrow.
Um,
Mr. Mayor.
just one other sec. I also want to point out that Counselor McLaughlin and I had a very interesting conversation with the sheriff from Sherman County over the weekend and his comments about the exact issues you're bringing up. And I would suggest you might want to reach out to Sheriff McGill because he, they're the ones that operate the jail. And he was very enlightening as to what's going on with the very issues and subjects you're bringing up. Sorry.
No, no need to apologize. Just two comments from where I sit. In regards to the request for data that the district attorney may have, I have had that conversation with him and requested some of the data that you're alluding to and to see what he could evaluate and what he could provide. I followed up with him a couple weeks ago, but I can certainly follow up again to see what the status is on that request and what he might be able to provide my office. And then to your comment about exit interviews as part of the HR policy that we have, we always offer that exit interview to departing employees. It's not always taken up on, but we always encourage departing employees to participate through that process. And I do get that information and use it in the administration that I do of city staff and city employees. And so that process does occur, and I have that information. I can share it with council. But I use that to identify some of the weaknesses or strengths. It's a neutral process that we go through. We're not looking for accolades. We're not looking for trouble necessarily either. We want the feedback from the departing employee.
It's all information that the council needs, because the council is the one that's ultimately responsible for providing adequate police protection. I think more information is a good thing.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think one thing I would just add for context there is that I oversee the staff that we have here at the city, including the police chief and our officers, our captain, all our patrol officers, and the other staff throughout the organization. And so that responsibility rests with me, again, under the oversight and policy guidance of the council. So there is just that additional context I would add.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Russ. Mhm. Yes, sir. Come forward, please. Give us your name and address.
Music to my ears.
Bob Kenyon. I live on 800 Liberty. I've been a resident here 25 or so years. Last Wednesday, we made this proposal to remove the flashing yellow lights on the mornings from 6 to 8. In other words, start at 6 with regular lighting and all day Sunday with regular lighting. We made this proposal to the Traffic Safety Council, and there was a very positive discussion. And I don't know what the final outcome was, but what's happened is, in the time I've been here, you either went way to the east or way to the west and found a way to get to the river. The best thing that ever happened was the underpass, the boat dock, and the riverfront trail. I think a lot of people will agree with that comment. The traffic on 3rd and 2nd has increased exponentially all this time, of course. And the traffic going down to the river has increased. Cyclists, pedestrians, and the average motorist, from what, and it's anecdotal, but the research I can find out is the average motorist isn't quite sure what to do with flashing yellow lights. So they just drive, so they just go. You're supposed to slow down and use caution. they might use caution in their mind, but I don't see any slowdown going on. So I have some limited vision, so I've had to really adapt to this situation. To me, the third and second are a barrier. I had to cross it 8 times yesterday because I wanted to go to the river twice. Some of you, I do a lot of rivering, as you maybe know, but and what I've started doing is actually getting off my bicycle and become a pedestrian. Believe me, that doesn't always work. It might work with the first lane coming, but remember, there's always 2. So I won't belabor all that, except to say that we went through this whole thing last Wednesday morning. The idea has come, let's put it that way, it's very, just to get rid of the yellow blinking. And be on in the middle of the night or something, I don't know about that, but 6 in the morning till 10 at night was what some people were saying. And regular lighting all day Sunday. And so in other words, at 6 in the morning, flashing yellow lights go off, regular, as it's called sometimes in motor vehicles, standard lighting. And then all day Sunday, 6 to 10. That's, and so this is a secondary discussion about it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very much.
Anybody have any questions for this gentleman?
What was the outcome of the safety committee? What did they decide?
I think it was a resolution to adopt what we just said. 6 to 10 every day, 7 days.
Have we received that in
But
your
I don't want to jump into that one because
I
not
think
on
that
that.
the traffic safety committee would make a recommendation. I haven't received the official recommendation from the traffic safety committee yet.
Right.
It also may be buried slightly in my inbox because I was at conference last week, to be frank.
Except
Yeah, Mr. Brown is a member of the Traffic Safety Committee and he's nodding his head in agreement with you. So yeah, apparently they went along with it. So. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you.
Anybody else like to address the city council for up to 5 minutes on anything not on the agenda? Yes, sir. Please give us your name and address.
Can I just follow your council guidelines? Not give my name and address publicly.
We prefer
I'll
that you
fill
give
out
us your name and
Piece of
address.
paper over here.
it works.
Well, we happen to know who you are anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah. I got some.
You're
high
Mr.,
powers.
is it Mr. Richard Wolf? Is that
Yes, I
right?
am.
Yeah.
I only paid $10. Let's go. Got it from the fire department to report on 4th of July happenings. July related incidents. There were no 4 alarms or 3 alarms or 2 alarm fires, no major. And I'd like to report that the fireworks these days have been monitored. No, and they basically sparkle. They'll not even hit the ceiling in here. The grass situation is real bad. But this is the whole list for 10 years. I paid for it. You don't get it. You can look it up. I don't think we should be weathermen or follow Wasco County. I got kicked out of, I was asked to leave H&R today because I, as Russ, asked what are the on a different subject, asked the qualifications of the project managers. We have a new position. It's developer, inspector, and project manager. And I would like to know, because I've been project construction manager most of my life. Licensed, bonded, insured. My son's got 5 foremen under him. I know my stuff. I'm real nervous being up here. I've been offended. It's not acceptable to me. That's why I'm willing to get up here. I'm willing to follow council guidelines. And I believe all of us should, including citizens. Damn, this is hard. I have family supporting me to do this, and that's why I'm doing it also. As I mentioned to you, Mayor. Thank you. I'm going to go to the beginning here. Before I forget, I do want to mention that the trees, I mentioned it a year ago, are dying because the tops of the roots are exposed. Not only are they exposed, there's a 1/2 inch of cast iron steel directly above those roots. I've saved a tree, and I think I saved another one yesterday with bark chips. But whatever you want on there, but get something on there before the trees die again. We're hot season. Hopefully it rained today. Hopefully you can read this. These are reading glasses. I'm going to read what I got here. I don't know
Well, you
how to
got-
do
you
this.
Take your time. You got 2 minutes, so.
Okay, I see it. The City of the Dalles council hearings can be followed by searching City of the Dalles on YouTube. Question. 1, council members should not be considered qualified if they're not willing to follow the council rules, example, Pledge of Allegiance 3.11. 2, asking us public announcement to publicly announce our names and address instead of following the council rules guideline section 3.7. Council hired H&R staffing, which that allows city executives and staff to impersonate project construction and development managers and as inspectors. This has created a gatekeeper's environment to an actual qualified building code law enforcement. 4, no awareness of council rules pages nor distributed and or not being followed among other council chair positions and staff. Example, last Friday's planning commission meeting. For example, City of the Dalles YouTube minutes 27.5 to 29.30.
Sir, you got 30 seconds.
Thank you. Without asking chairman permission to speak, Joshua Chandler, planning director, abruptly cut off a citizen from finishing her 5 minutes. He also told her basically what we're going to talk about and what we're here to talk about. She also was interrupted, confronted, and second time publicly by the city attorney you hired, Jonathan Carrera. This time again for her name and address, a third time. He did not ask chairman to speak either. Third time she was confronted and interrupted by Commissioner Maria Penta in regards to asking about citizenship.
Mr. Wolf, your time is up. Thank you very much for coming.
Any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
Nobody?
I'm kind
I'm
of
fine.
confused.
I'm fine. It's okay.
Do you have that? Can you email it to me or what you're reading from?
I will.
Easier if I can read stuff. I'm
Okay.
curious about.
There's a lot more.
Oh.
This is what I've been working on for all day. And
Why don't you give it to the city clerk and she'll make sure that it goes to all of us. Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the city council for up to 5 minutes about anything that is not on the agenda? Last call. Thank you. Item 6 is the city manager's report. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few items as typical. Just wanted to report that we did a congressional site visit and tour for some different staffers on July 11th. That went really well. This was in partnership and coordinated with the community outreach team, and we visited several different sites around the community to talk about some of the projects we're working on, including with some of our partners. We visited the airport, the proposed sports complex site, Chenoweth Middle School, and Q Life co-location room, amongst a few others. I attended the swearing in ceremony for a new officer. And last week for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, attended the Oregon City County Managers Association Conference in Pendleton with Mr. Hunter. Most notably, I think the most interesting session for me was touring their UAV, UAS testing range that they have in Pendleton. That was a very interesting and unique development that they have there. And then finally, very briefly, I'd like to introduce Dan Spots, who I think is still in the back of the room. He is our new Economic Development Officer. And as you will see on the consent agenda this evening, we're making some changes to management of the vertical housing zone, and those duties will fall to Mr. Spots, along with quite a few other things. So thank you, Dan, for joining us. And with that, that's my report.
Welcome aboard, Dan. Okay, item 7 is city council reports. We'll start on my left. Councilor Runyon.
Just a couple of things, citizen discussions about some crosswalks in various or lack of in various areas of the city today. July 13th, swearing in of the new police officer, Joseph Green. And he's going to get a lot of training before he heads off to school, because I think it was November, was it? Before he heads off to the academy. But that's well worth going to if you haven't been to the swearing in of an officer.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one thing probably of note, which is I attended by Zoom, but still I did attend the traffic safety committee meeting last week, and we had a robust conversation about said flashing lights, and I expect a formal recommendation coming down the pipeline.
Councilor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing to report this evening.
Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week I met with the city manager. We had no urban renewal meeting in July, but we obviously do have a new economic development officer who I worked with to get a quote into his nice press release about the Tony's building. I'm sure you've seen the articles in the paper. We are going to be having a URA meeting in August, even though city council doesn't normally meet. And that is my report.
Thank you. Councilor McLaughlin.
I attended the Regional Airport Commission last Friday, and I note that fuel sales are reaching high time limits. Jet traffic and military usage is on the rise. Last Friday in the afternoon, I met with Mayor Mays and Airbnb operator and a representative from the neighborhood surrounding the West Scenic Drive and West 20th Street. It was a meeting scheduled to help improve communication and address some grievances on both sides of the issues. In my opinion, the meeting was of value and will have the effect of reducing neighborhood concerns. I believe that we address many of the root causes of the grievances, and a better climate will prevail. I attended the open house at McCack Annex located in downtown The Dalles. I was impressed with the facility and believe that it provides an important step in helping individuals and families through difficult times. That's my report.
Thank you. As far as my report goes, I attended the Chamber's Community Affairs Committee meeting on the 13th. The guest speaker was none other than our city manager, Matthew Klebs. I also had a meeting with the new executive director of the Dalles Arts Center, Sally Johnson. I also attended the grand opening and ribbon cutting for Under Reiner, the new car dealership on 6th Street. And this morning I was on KODL radio with Al Wynn. 4 other things have already been mentioned: the tour of our community, of all the projects through the community outreach team, the swearing in of Joseph Green and our police department, the annex celebration that was held on Friday, and the meeting that Councilor McLaughlin mentioned with some citizens regarding short-term rentals. So that concludes our reports. Item 8, consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any counselor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. Tonight, we have 5 items on the consent agenda. First is the approval of the July 10th City Council meeting minutes. Second, third, and fourth are 3 items related to the surplusing of property with the police department. Some 40 caliber ammunition, 4 police vehicles, and some 40 caliber handguns. And finally, fifth is a resolution designating our city manager as the vertical housing manager for the city of the Dalles. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the only correction to your last statement is that the resolution for the vertical housing zone manager designates the EDO, not
Is
myself.
what I couldn't hear.
Sorry, it designates the economic development officer as the zone manager, not myself.
You
Oh.
did mention that when you introduced Mr. Spots, but I thought I read the
Yep.
resolution different for some reason. So we'll take your word for it.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as corrected?
Mr. Mayor, I so move.
For a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Councilor McLaughlin and seconded by Councilor Randall to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 9A is a public hearing to close out the Community Development Block Grant Project. We have with us our Director of Community Development, Josh Chandler. Now is the time for a public hearing to receive testimony regarding the closeout of the Community Development Block Grant, CBDG, project number HA 2101, providing COVID-19 emergency rental and mortgage assistance. I will open the public hearing and ask for a staff report. Following the staff report, I'll call for comments from the public. With that, I'm opening the public hearing. And would you like to give a staff report, Mr. Chandler?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Joshua Chandler, Community Development Director. One correction to the agenda line item. This is actually Community Development Block Grant number H20012, and this is actually a home repair program. So that's just a minor correction there. So on June 30th, the city completed CDBG home repair grant program administered by Business Oregon. The purpose of this program is to provide needed home repairs and upgrades to eligible properties within our region. The city, along with the Mid-Columbia Housing Authority as a subrecipient, was awarded this grant in March 2021 for a total not to exceed $500,000. In total, at the end of all of it, 12 homes were completed with repairs including new roofs, siding, exterior painting, HVAC systems, windows, insulation, and ramps. I provided a breakdown and some bullet points of the program in the staff report. As you can see, this program went for about 28 months. 30 residents were assisted, 12 different households, 50% of those households, female head of household, 50% were Hispanic owned, 15% had at least one elderly resident, and one of those homes had a disabled individual. In addition, I've provided a breakdown of the area median income for those households. 3 of those households had a 50% or 50% or less AMI. So those are classified as low or extremely low income households. 9 of those had 50 to 80% AMI. So unlike previous, the total amount funded was a little over $200,000, and we're still waiting on the final draw, pending a final draw. So unlike some successes that we've had with CDBG programs recently, this program was faced with multiple challenges from the beginning, and it resulted in awarding only 40% of our grant. The COVID-19 pandemic greatly impacted the administration of this program, not only at the local level, but the state level. I believe at the state level, we probably had at least 2 project managers in the course of that. It was a rocky start getting going with a new system at Business Oregon. And then at the local level with the Housing Authority cited multiple staff turnovers. 3 separate people that were assigned to this project came and went in the period of that time. So you're dealing with, slowly trying to introduce a new project, get the thing going. So there was a little bit of a hiccup on that end. In addition, there was a difficulty obtaining bids from local contractors and availability to complete the work. Typically, when we do these projects, the goal is to obtain 3 bids. Most of the time, we were getting only 1 bid. Of 50 different homes that were different applications that were received, only 12 of those were actually processed. Some of those for various different reasons. So the purpose of this public hearing is to receive public testimony concerning the administration of this program. This is part of the closeout process for all CDBG programs. The city and the Housing Authority are currently in the process of finalizing all program material, and we should be done relatively quickly, just in the coming weeks. So budget implications, there's none. This was actually, the city acts as really a pass-through for the Housing Authority. So the city ultimately processes the paperwork with the state. So we're kind of the go-between. So there was really no overall budget impact. And I am here. That's about it. Wraps up the staff report. I'm here to answer any questions. I'm also joined here by Saldivar Torres Cruz of the Housing Authority to provide any Spanish translations if they're needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. Welcome, Mr. Cruz. Okay, is there anyone in the audience or in the public that would like to testify regarding this CBDG grant? Anybody would like to testify? Okay. Hearing none, the public hearing is adjourned. And any city council member have any questions? Councilor Runyon.
And I'll disclose, having served on the board of directors, of Columbia Housing for 8 years, some time ago, and chair of that organization for a number of those years. Just for the council's edification and the audience and whatnot, the money goes back to the state. Is that correct?
It does, yes.
Okay. And does that affect the fact that we were only able to use 200 and some thousand of the money allotted? Does that affect our opportunities to get funding in the future?
It does not. And it was a specific question that we had. It felt when we received the letter from it felt a little like a black eye. So I definitely clarified with the project manager.
I just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you. Let's see here. You mentioned you had, in many cases, single bids instead of 3.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those bids were denied? Or were they denied? Did they go forward? Those single bids that you did get on different projects, or was that denied and that's why some of them didn't go forward?
No, if a bid, and this is all the Housing Authority that administers all of that. But yes, if a bid was received, the project went forward. So ultimately we were just waiting for something. And there was times we only got one.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I had.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Chandler? Councilor Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This may be for Mr. Chandler or Mr. Cruz as appropriate. So 50 folks families put in applications, 12 were able to be served due to sort of a perfect storm of staffing and various hiccups, as you say. What's the horizon for going after either renewal or just more of this kind of funding? Are you going to go for more of this kind of funding? The need is there. People are willing to jump through the hoops and apply. And
it is. And so I am new to the CDBG process. I've now actually worked on 3 of them. So not too extremely new, but how it works is most likely the city of the Dalles will not be administering the next one. It's essentially there's different communities that kind of take the turn, and it's the Housing Authority fully intends to go forward with whatever other funding and process that can any grants that they can go forward with, but it most likely won't be the city. Kind of, like I said, take turns. It'll probably come back to the Dalles some years from now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Questions? Okay,
Great. Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Item 10A is consideration of an ordinance amending the city's municipal code. Mr. Kara.
Thank you very much, Mayor Mays. I wanted to see if our codes enforcement officer, Nikki Lesich, wouldn't mind joining us up here. And here she comes. And so just to get us started, I wanted to go over my staff report on this matter. As a refresher, I can't believe how fast time has flown by, but at its March 13th regular meeting, City Council directed staff to bring for its consideration some of the ways the city might be able to best respond to some of the citizens' rising nuisance concerns and other property-related issues that may be impacting the community's livability. As part of staff's response, the codes enforcement officer and I met to review some city ordinances to determine how best to improve the city's police powers to address some of these community needs. It's part of a multifaceted approach that the city manager, I'm sure, will have an opportunity to go over later in this meeting. Generally, our recommendation is to adopt a slightly modified version of the attached and proposed ordinance to support a more efficient, timely, and robust code enforcement here in the city of the Dalles. And so the attached ordinance, General Ordinance number 23-1399, amends various provisions of Title V, which regulates offenses, and Title VI, which regulates traffic within the city limits. And so this is sort of an omnibus shotgun style approach, which is hopefully a series of small tweaks that I think in the aggregate would lead to something a bit more than, a sum greater than their parts. And so just to go over the few changes, which some are more modest than others, but to give you an example, when Nikki and I met, we figured Title V would be the best place to start because as a codes enforcement officer, a primary number of her dealings involve Title V offenses. And so the first was to augment the city's authority when it comes to towing abandoned vehicles that are located on public or private property. And the proposed amendments consider the city being able to tow nearly any kind of vehicle. Currently, our code could be construed as perhaps being limited to only those vehicles that require licensure and registration. And so the proposed changes provide a more expansive definition, which would apply to vehicles that do not or are not regulated by the state of Oregon. That's the first of a few changes. Next, I wanted to consider some of the codes enforcement officers' primary concerns relating to repeat violators. It seems a number of individuals and properties tend to be causing a significant number of issues for codes enforcement throughout the city limits. And so the second change that I was hoping for council's consideration tonight would be adding a provision for increasing the penalty associated with multiple violations of repeat ordinances, or increasing the penalties associated with multiple violations occurring within a 12-month period. Currently, Title V offenses are punishable by a fine of not to exceed $1,250 per violation. The proposed ordinance attempts to increase that $1,250 per violation by an additional $1,250 per each subsequent violation occurring within a 12-month period. Whether a $1,250 penalty is imposed is a question for the municipal judge, but the ordinance would at least give the municipal court the authority to start to consider additional penalties for those that are not abiding. The third proposed change includes, you know what? I think I've done enough talking for now. I wanted to pass the microphone to Nikki, who is my co-host for this particular staff report, to talk about our favorite thing in the world, which is roosters in the city limits.
Okay, so one of the changes that that Jonathan and I referred to was the roosters in our community. We've had annexed in some property some many years ago, a decade or more, where roosters were a part of the county and then they're part of the city. I do receive a great deal of rooster calls on properties that it's disturbing their peace, disturbing their livelihood outside, and disturbing their rest. The biggest issue is that when you do get your chicks, that you cannot identify whether they're going to be a rooster or a chick. You'll find out when the first cock-a-doodle-doo screeches out, then you know you've got a rooster. So there's a percentage that I don't know why I know all this stuff. There's a percentage of when you buy that is going to be roosters, and I've had people up to over 50% of them have been roosters. So it's a surprise to the owners as well as it is to the neighborhood. When you multiply two or more roosters, it can really distract the whole ambiance of the neighborhood, and it gets overwhelming. It's also overwhelming for the owners who have been basically very cooperative in making Sunday dinners out of them. So, but it does take time because they're still cute when they first start roostering. So, so I wanted to put that in there so that people knew right up front that roosters will never make it through the process. People have called and said, "Can I have a rooster?" I said, "You probably won't make it through the process because we do have a permit process that you can have a rooster by our previous codes enforcement, but it will qualify as a noise ordinance if your neighbors complain. And your neighbors could be a half a block away and still complain. It doesn't have to be an immediate neighbor. So it never really makes it through the process. And I think it's just good to have it very clear and upfront that roosters are not allowed in the city limits. And then I can educate when we have our permits to say, when you do have chicks, if there are any roosters, they're going to need to go, so that we can be a little more proactive than reactive to roosters in our neighborhoods.
I think it's a very common sense approach to municipal authority and life in the city limits. The fourth, I think we're at number 4 now. Fourth recommended change to our municipal codes, Title V, includes adding some certain types of vegetation to the definition of noxious vegetation in our code. And so I mentioned at the very beginning of the staff report, my recommendation here tonight, or the staff's recommendation rather, is to adopt a slightly modified version of the proposed ordinance. I want to pass around, if council wouldn't mind taking one and passing the rest down and passing it back to me so I could do the right side of the table as well. Some pictures to demonstrate the proposed change. And so these are pictures, and we'll be sure to provide one to the city clerk for inclusion in the agenda. We wanted to add this to our general ordinance tonight based off of some last minute comments from members of the public that we're hoping to add the tree of heaven to the list of noxious vegetation. And our initial draft, which is in your agenda packet, includes adding bamboo and cacti to the list of prohibited noxious vegetation if they extend into the public right-of-way or across a property line or are used by trespassers for habitation. And so the proposal here tonight, and I'll be able to provide a staff recommendation with some amended motion language, would be to add the tree of heaven, which is in the picture in front of you, to that list of prohibited noxious vegetation. I'm going to defer to the codes enforcement officer to talk about some of her incidences here in the city limits connected with this plant. But generally, for those that are unfamiliar with it, its smell is described as sort of like a rancid peanut butter or old gym socks. It is a highly invasive plant. It produces an overly abundant amount of seeds. It crowds out native species with dense thickets. and it secretes a chemical into the soil, which is damaging to other plants. And so I'll let the codes enforcement officer take it from here to provide some of her particular incidences where this might have occurred within the city limits.
Isn't this fun? So the plants can grow very quickly, even from when they're seedlings. It can go up to 15 feet in just the first year. So it grows aggressively, and it can grow and span, especially when its wind is part of its travels. It can go up to 50 feet in surrounding areas. So it affects property owners. It affects development lots that are just sitting there and freely getting whatever volunteer seeds come into that, and it's very aggressive. I found out that the female seed can produce up to 300,000 seeds a year. So you're looking at that many seeds. Even if you cut that in half, that's a lot of seeds throughout our community. It does have a very rancid smell. I think Jonathan kind of highlighted the wet gym socks or cat urine smell, and a lot of the neighbors, when we do have some public right of ways that we do clear, and we do have the tree of heaven, with the wind, it brings that fragrance right through town, and it's not light. So I have received quite a few concerns over the year that they'd like to see that be one of our invasive species and not definitely not be planted. It is in our cannot be planted list of trees in a public right of way. For example, if you're a private property owner and you want to put a tree or two in your planting strip, you need to get approval from Public Works for that. And this is not one of the trees for approval. And there's a wide list of what you cannot and a strict list of what you can. So for public information, that's good information. So I would like to see that this be part of, especially with property owners. Normally it's a civil issue, and when it comes to regards to vegetation encroaching to the next neighboring property. But if you have this added to the invasive species, then we can also enforce that they keep that away. What happens if it goes neglected and it is not a civil issue, and it continues to be a civil issue, then you have the neighboring properties are the ones that have to maintain the bamboo, the cacti, and this invasive tree and seedlings, and it's very cumbersome. You have some senior citizens out there, or people with disabilities, or people that just don't have the time to take care of the neighbor's yard as well as their own. This is really cumbersome for them.
In addition to all of the things that the codes enforcement officer just mentioned with respect to the definition of what noxious vegetation is proposed to be considered as, we'd also like to propose for council's consideration here tonight, reducing the timelines that are currently found in section 5.24.040 regarding the notice required for abatement of plants considered noxious vegetation. Currently, our code is set up for, far too long notice, in our opinion, providing property owners 28 days to remove plants deemed noxious. After consulting with the codes enforcement officer and reviewing some best practices, it seems cutting that in half from 28 days down to 14 days will have some marked impacts on the city's livability. And so I think that would be proposal number 5. In addition, actually, I think that's it for Title 5. Did I miss any?
I think so. I can elaborate on that. And
well, there's only one change to Title 6. And so I'm happy just to review it now. And then, of course, council, please feel free to jump in anytime if you have any questions. But with respect to Title 6, which again regulates traffic in the city limits, after coordinating with the codes enforcement officer, it seems that an amendment to TDMC 6.04.160, which addresses prohibited parking or standing for recreational vehicles located on the public right-of-way, should be amended. And so currently, that section of our code authorizes 6 permits per year per dwelling to park your recreational vehicle on the public right-of-way. However, it does not address at all really the number of permits that may be issued at any given one time in succession. And so the proposed ordinance keeps the current number of 6 permits per year per dwelling, but it imposes a 1 month, well, I suppose it's a 1 permit per month limit on that. And so that the risks, well, I'll let the codes enforcement officer talk about some of the challenges that she's faced there. And we also included a caveat for exceptions. If the police chief in writing approves of a waiver of that, the proposed ordinance allows the city to issue more than 1 permit per month. But absent that, it's the city would be limited to 1 permit per month, still having 6 per year for allowing a recreational vehicle to be parked in the public right of way per dwelling. And so, Nikki, can you please share some of the challenges that you faced in dealing with this current ordinance as drafted?
In relation to recreational vehicles, particularly motorhomes and travel trailers, there has been a weakness in this ordinance as far as it doesn't state that you can't have it consecutively. So what needs to happen is that you need to monitor it every 5 days to see if they continue to get their permit, and they'll continue to do it for 6 weeks. If you're not monitoring it closely, if your codes officer is not monitoring it closely, it could be another week or half a week in between, and you could get 2 months out of living in front of someone's house in a neighborhood. And it's not drawn very, it was designed for people that wanted to clean, for going hunting or camping. It's designed for them to have that in front of their vehicle for convenience, not for people to be living on the public right of way in a neighborhood and disrupting the neighborhood.
So in addition to, well, everything that we've talked about here tonight, I just wanted to mention that although this isn't a public hearing, Oregon law does require the city to provide an opportunity for any interested person to comment on the city's enactment of any ordinance, which prescribes a new fee or a fee increase or an increase in the rate or other manner in which the amount of a fee is determined or calculated. While this action item, again, is not a public hearing, best practices suggest that the mayor ask the audience for comment on this proposed ordinance before council considers adoption.
Anybody in the audience like to comment on this particular ordinance, Mr. Nichols?
Thank you, Roger Nichols, 1617 Oregon State. More question of concept. There are a number of these trees already established. Would this require homeowners to remove?
Which trees?
Tree of Heaven?
The tree of heaven?
Sorry?
The Tree of Heaven?
No, they're not. They're not being required to remove them. Sure.
Anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to the city council on this particular ordinance? Questions from the city council or comments? Councilor McLaughlin.
I have a question for our resident rooster expert. Would this be immediate if roosters are banned? Would it be phased in so people would have a chance to do something with the roosters?
Well, when I do get a report from them, it's usually it's a new rooster. It's not an old rooster that's a problem.
Right.
Unless someone new goes into a neighborhood, but definitely would work with them with a reasonable timeline to have the rooster either placed outside of the city limits or what they choose to do with the rooster.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I might just say, the codes enforcement division of our police department operates, it's my understanding at least, operates on a complaint-driven basis. And so I think it is worth noting that if council adopts this ordinance here tonight, it wouldn't be effective for 30 days, which would give our codes enforcement division an opportunity to provide some public outreach to some of the more common persons throughout the city limits that might already have roosters or might already have trees of heaven or something along those lines for each of these changes. And so I think there should be a sufficient amount of time available to us to, before implementation. So
I just didn't want rooster heads to roll.
Sure.
I'm just kidding.
I have a question.
Councilor Long.
Yeah, so I guess it's 2 questions now. So under the noxious vegetation, what Mr. Nichols was just asking. It's actually if those particular things, the tree of heaven, bamboo and cacti, et cetera, are in the right of way or across the property line, not on someone's property, correct?
And that's exactly right. And that's a very good distinction.
Okay.
The city is only regulating these noxious vegetations because they have impacts on the public health, safety, and welfare. As far as being located wholly on private property, the city could also regulate, any activity that could potentially be having impacts on adjacent properties like smell and noise and dust and odor. Well, I guess smell is odor, noise and dust and light pollution and things of that nature. But otherwise, the codes enforcement officer only acts consistent with this code to the degree that it transverses the public right of way or another property line, right?
Okay, and then my original question before Mr. Nichols asked his very good question was I didn't quite understand the third thing, or are used by trespassers for habitation.
Yeah, so that's currently in our code.
What does that mean?
It means if, let's say a large bush is being used by people trespassing onto the property for habitation to live in.
Okay.
I didn't write that part of the code. It's been here for several decades.
Okay.
But
Trespass is the
Counselor Long, if that's something that the council wishes to remove, now would be an excellent time.
I'm sorry, does that refer to being in the public right of way? The trespassers?
I believe it refers to being located upon private property.
So I have kind of an out of control Fontania bush. So if someone is like dug in down there and camping,
yeah,
and we find it, I'm gonna have to cut the bush down.
Under our current ordinance, it seems that, well, again, we're on a complaint-driven basis here in the City of the Dalles Codes Enforcement Division. And so, Nikki, have you ever run into habitation in some wildlife out in the city limits?
As far as someone living in the bushes on public property or private property?
On any property, yeah, living in the bushes.
Living on the property, which could have bushes. I don't think I really, be the police chief could answer that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty dated language, pretty old part of our
I mean,
code.
it's very attractive to have in tall vegetation, bushy areas where people would take up habitation in a public area, in a public like ODOT or city or county property, just as well as it would be on private property that's not tended to or monitored.
It would give the city, it seems, at least based off of this discussion, it seems to me, it would give the city an opportunity to remove the bush or whatever the vegetation was. It would just be another tool in the city's belt, I suppose.
You certainly have less problems with habitation in those areas if the vegetation is clearly controlled. ODOT has taken a very strong stance in the last year to remove a lot of the bushes and vegetation to keep that down, to kind of keep that particular problem from being attractive.
Counselor Long, do you have any other questions?
No.
Anybody else have any Counselor Richardson?
I don't have to go first, but I do have one or two.
Please-
Okay.
Please proceed.
I will say that with regard to roosters, that's fine. I don't think anybody should probably fight for them. And once upon a time, I got some on accident. So I didn't pay the extra money to get them chicks sex checked. That was a hassle, but it was on me to take care of. Fortunately, nobody complained and I sent them to a better home, which I think is necessary, right? If you're bothering your neighbors. Question I have is about the RV parking, permitting, removal. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Is it specific areas of town? Is it specific behavior? Describe this a little bit more.
Reason that we had the initial permits was to allow people to pull their trailers or their campers or their motorhomes onto in front of their home and not in front of someone else's home.
Sure.
For a minimal amount of time to service it, clean it, or load it up. And that's kind of was to address that. What has come out of it is that looking at the 6 permits a year, some are taking advantage of that. They are not here temporarily. They want to stay here living on the streets, and they use up the permits consecutively or draw it out as far as they can in order to stay here. Immediately that affects the neighborhood in all cases that it's been taken advantage of, or it has created more traffic, it has created more noise, and it's been a safety issue to the neighborhood at large.
I don't know. I'm wondering if, I don't have an RV, but I can imagine it's a bit of it could be a bit of an issue to relocate one for some folks. I'm wondering if 24 hours is enough notice.
24 hours?
I'm looking at the, this is page 23 of our packet, or page 6 of the staff report. Under point F, a recreational vehicle parked without a permit, recreational vehicles have been tagged for impoundment, may be towed at the owner's expense 24 hours after the notice of impoundment has been affixed to the vehicle. I'm wondering if that's enough. Convince me that's enough time as opposed to, like, say, 48 hours.
When I post the tagging, it is usually in a conspicuous, almost abandoned looking area when this is attached, but say if it wasn't, it has all the information on there to contact the city codes enforcement officer to explain the situation and work logically and respectfully through the process if there is a story that belongs to this. If not, then the most likely they have abandoned it, and it's and they're neglecting the property and using the public right of way as a place to store.
So if you slap if I get one and I park it in front of my neighbor's place because it's convenient, you slap a sticker on there and I call you, then we have a conversation and we work that out, or is it?
We'll have a conversation about the permit process and that you can park in front of your own vehicle, and direct you to our secretary at the police department to get a permit for 5 days at no cost to you. Just have to show proof of registration and then an ID, and you can do that.
I just want to mention, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right, to Councilor Richardson, which the only segment of this provision of Title VI, Chapter 6.04 that we are amending is in the bolded and underlined part of Section 9D, and that everything else on that page has been in our code for at least 12 years.
Thank you for the reminder. I'm kind of taking a holistic view of the thing.
You bet.
These are great questions, really. I'm glad that you're asking them, because if you're representing your constituents and if you have questions from what you're experiencing, who supports you, we need to know these things so we can work through them responsibly and respectfully.
How many times I'm not going to file an informational request to like get the data on this. So I'm going to just take your word. How many times have you towed one and someone said, my goodness, that was mine. I would have taken care of it. I was out of town for 2 days. I missed it. How could I possibly have missed it? And you've taken it.
Let me answer that in the B part of my answer. The A part of my answer is, since January, I have tagged not just motorhomes, trailers, campers, and vehicles, 370 vehicles in the city of the Dalles.
Presumably abandoned.
Right, that have abandoned, expired tags, disabled motorhomes, trailers, boats. Maybe I have towed, as far as motorhomes go, maybe 3 in the last year.
Okay.
And
What's the A
2
part? What's
and-
the B part?
and none of them asked for them back. It's usually the ones that we tow. I would say all of the ones that we have towed, when it comes to abandoned motorhomes and trailers, they are full of garbage. They're full of needles. They're full of trash. They're full of backed up toilets. And the people that we work with to take these off of our hands do a tremendous job of making sure that it is environmentally correct environmentally taken care of, as well as it is disposed of in our through our scrapping process.
Who's the company that does that for us?
We have two companies. One is Guzman Towing, Guzman Brothers Towing out of Hood River. It does an excellent job. And then we have Kingdom Towing that's here locally. That is a new business in the last year and a half that takes on the smaller units, but the big, large, cumbersome and very full of things that people shouldn't have to handle. The police department has supported all of our tow companies with sharps containers so that they only have to handle the needles once. But even handling it once is putting their health at risk as well. So there's a lot at risk when we do other than just towing them and then holding them for the time period to see if someone really wants to reclaim it.
Thank you. That's very helpful. 0 of 370, I think you said, was the number of people that wanted it back. All right.
This year.
Sure.
Feeling better about it. Thank you. My last question, I think, is one of the pellets in this shotgun approach, so to speak, allows the city or augments the city's authority to tow abandoned vehicles that don't necessarily require licensure and registration. What doesn't require a license and registration?
It would be like commercial machinery, like
How about an excavator?
excavator. Yeah, excavator, where we've, there has been people that, and it's not local, they come out of the area. And we do have some locals, but they're easier to work with, that will basically plant their equipment there well after the project's gone and using the public right of way as storage. And there's nothing we can do about it because it's not registered through the state DMV.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Other questions for the staff?
Nikki, thank you for talking about roosters because I come from another era and my grandfather had a chicken coop at 10th and Kelly Avenue, catty corner from Spencer, Libby and Powell. And that's where between the ages, well, in the mid 50s, between about age 3 until I started going to school, I stayed there every day and every morning. Of course, we went out to get eggs and roosters were part of everyday life. So there were lots of coops around town back in those days, and things have certainly changed. And poor roosters, they're just trying to earn a living. But
I've had some difficult conversations if we're trying to talk about roosters a little bit more. Some families give their children roosters as presents, and so it's difficult actually. So there is a little more community social services connection out there to talk to the families and let them know that they shouldn't use roosters in the city limits as gifts. But so I guess I'm basically saying cockadoodle don'ts in the city of the Dells.
are we going to be famous as the rooster and doofer from a few years ago?
I'm not going to print any stickers for the back of your window, counselor. She wanted to know.
That quote down, cockadoodle don't.
It's very clever.
Any other questions for the staff?
No.
But Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to sort of summarize, these are admittedly some very unique and out of left field changes. But after consulting with the Codes Enforcement Division and the Police Department, it seems that in the aggregate, position of my office and their division is, we're optimistic that the city's livability should be improved upon council's adoption of the proposed general ordinance number 23-1399. With that said, I am hoping to provide council with staff's recommendation here tonight. It is actually not the bolded and italicized one that is usually the first one you see. It is the second one, which is to make and read aloud substantive modifications to and then adopting general ordinance number 23-1399. The changes that I'm hoping council will consider reading aloud would be to add the tree of heaven to the list of noxious vegetation currently listed in TDMC chapter 5.24. In addition to bamboo and cacti, to add the tree of heaven and its Latin name. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. I would defer to Councilor Richardson to speak that into the microphone.
I believe it's Ailanthus altissima.
I'm sure it is. And so that is the scientific name for the tree of heaven. And so that would be staff's recommendation for council here tonight.
So the only change you're is the tree of heaven change to the, everything you've?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't we just adopt the ordinance as amended?
The charter requires any substantive amendments to any ordinance that's available for public inspection, have its modification be read aloud in order for it to be considered effective.
Okay,
One other question. Maybe I missed it in here, but ordinances are effective as of the date passed, or how long till they become effective?
That's an excellent question, Councilor Runyon. Typically, ordinances are effective 30 days after adoption, unless an emergency applies, in which case it will be apparent on the face of the ordinance that it will be
Said
effective
30 days.
30 days from passage, from adoption.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
along those lines, is there anyone here on the city council who would like to have the ordinance read in full? Good answer. Thank you. Okay, looking for a motion to adopt.
I'd be happy to make the motion, but I sort of lost the thread of what exactly we're supposed to read.
I'm sorry.
We first have to read it by title only.
Yes, please proceed. If I'm a little,
Sorry.
General ordinance number 23-1399, amending various provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code, Title V, offenses, and Title VI, traffic.
nice.
I think it does.
Okay.
Just as long as the motion being made is the staff's recommendation is the council makes alternative number 2 and reading aloud specifically the substantive modification of including the tree of heaven to section 5.24 5.24.010 definitions under subsection 5.
Now, will tree of heaven suffice, or does it have to be the Latin scientific name?
I would prefer the scientific name.
Okay. I would suggest that Counselor Richardson spell the scientific name, if you would.
Oh, I can spell.
You can spell? Okay,
Yeah,
go
I can
ahead.
spell it. It is AILANTHUSALTISSIMA.
Counselor Richardson is nodding his head in agreement. Okay. Looking for a motion.
I'm going for number 2 here. I move to adopt general ordinance number 23-1399, an ordinance amending various provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code Title V, including the substantive modification to include tree of heaven, aka Alenthus altissima, in section 5.24.010 under subsection 5. And Title VI, traffic by title only.
Is there a second?
Well, I'll second that.
Been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to adopt an ordinance amending various provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code as described. Is there any more discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Lesich.
Tap it. Nope. Nope.
I want to say that, thank you so much, Jonathan. Listening to what might seem like minor changes and modifications to our ordinances. These are truly, give you the leverage to expedite the expectations of our community when it comes to enforcement. In particular, with the education. And I do appreciate Honorable Mayor and Council for the time that you have listened and listen well, ask your questions and allow me to
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay. Item 10B is another ordinance amending the city's municipal code in relation to overnight parking in city-owned parking lots. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to ask the police chief to join us up at the table for the next couple items that we have coming down the pipeline. Again, you have another general ordinance if we feel up for another one in your packet. Included, as always, is my agenda staff report detailing, as you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, a proposed downtown overnight parking permit system to improve management, use and safety of some of the downtown parking lots that the city owns. As the community may know, the city owns several different parking lots in the downtown core, most notably the parking lots on First Street, behind some of the main businesses we have there on Second Street, as well as a parking lot called the Arco parking lot across the street from St. Peter's, and then another parking lot on the other side of the roundabout. It's kind of more used as a park and ride facility. These lots are all open to the public at no charge for around the clock parking needs. Under this proposed new overnight parking permit system, there will still be no charge. There's no permit fee in order to get a permit, but a permit would be required in posted parking lots to park there overnight between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Eligible individuals who could apply for a permit include downtown business owners, property owners, downtown residents, and employees. And included in the packet here is a map that highlights the different areas that we've identified where a business owner or an employee may be eligible. They would come to the city manager's office and submit an application and any required documentation to prove their eligibility, which would include, could include documentation such as a water sewer bill, a tax statement, or a business owner email or letter attesting that the individual is an employee at their place of business. And these permits would have an annual required renewal process. I'd like to draw your attention to page 28 of 46. I'm on the right section here, 6.02.02. This is defining the purpose of this chapter and the intent behind this system and its objectives. And this relates ultimately to the authority that I would have under this proposed ordinance to revoke a permit if it was not being used in a manner that aligns with this purpose section, kind of a management tool, if you will. To utilize this new tool, the parking lot, the ordinance, of course, would have to pass, and the relevant parking lot would need to be posted with appropriate signage. And my intent, if the council is supportive of such an ordinance, is to post such signs primarily for the First Street parking lot only at this time, not the parking lots at the Arco lot or the parking lot on the other side of the roundabout. There may be some costs associated with towing vehicles as a penalty if there is a car parked there without a permit, again, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. We do have towing funds budgeted, but the potential increase in tows associated with this new ordinance was not considered going through the prior budget process. But it's our intent that education and outreach to ensure compliance would be the first measure that we'd use in employing this as we rolled out this potential new program. As mentioned a moment ago, this is not an emergency ordinance, so it would become effective 30 days after passage, as well as the posting of the required signs informing users of the parking lot of this requirement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
We may want to move the chief to the microphone's working if we're having a problem. Is that microphone working?
Chief, you want to
slide over?
test it?
Sounds like it's working to me.
Great, thank you. Questions for the staff? Counselor Long.
Yes, so City Manager Klebs, one of the things you and I talked about when we met and discussed this ordinance originally was including on the signage some way for people to be able to contact someone if they needed to leave their vehicle unexpectedly overnight so that it wasn't towed. And for example, if they had been drinking downtown and chose to leave their vehicle there and make a way home safer.
Yeah, so as some of the administrative processes and policies would develop, we would develop if this ordinance receives support would, you know, as we spoke about previously, some of the application process to go through, the actual permit itself, and then the actual verbiage that would be on the signage. And as always, if there are circumstances beyond an individual's control or they accidentally got into a situation, there is a police line that they can contact at all times. to request assistance or inform them of a situation that may be preventing them from moving that car. Again, as we roll this out, some education and working with individuals to ensure compliance would be that first step, if at all possible.
Other questions, comments? I have one. What is the thinking of the staff as far as broadening this to include certain public streets, public rights of way?
So, oh, sorry, was there a follow-up to that?
No,
Sure.
pretty sure,
Okay.
depending on your answer.
So, initially and in alignment with the purpose statement, we were looking at the utility and use of these city-owned public parking lots for the commercial use and continued economic revitalization and commercial activity in that downtown core. The city can employ different management techniques for parking throughout the city. I think one concern that I might have would be the depth and breadth of that kind of control or management. If we have too many various rules throughout the city, certain parking here under certain hours, as we see in many larger cities, certainly becomes a significant staff workload to monitor and enforce those various parking requirements throughout the city. And so really wanted to focus primarily on these commercial lots that we have downtown that are used by a wide variety of the community that we have. Chief, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just would say that the approach here is in alignment with the city's ongoing approach of a complaint-driven process. And really our complaints so far have been surrounding the downtown lot along First. And so to handle that, I think we'll take care of the lion's share of problems downtown. And of course, the police department will provide a patrol note for anybody who is stranded down there or somehow finds himself in the position of a short-term, hey, I got to leave my car here overnight. And we will accommodate those people and go forward and enforce this through its intent, which is really through education. And, we'll want to see proper signage so people are notified of the new rules.
I noticed on the cul-de-sac on West Second Street, there's a sign there that says no overnight parking or no, is that authorized by, or did somebody just put that up to?
Well, that certainly appears to conform to the uniform signage standards of ODOT. And so I would say if somebody put that up, it came out of a professional sign shop and I think it's theirs.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that question is because I was thinking in terms of a similar situation on other city streets. Especially where city streets where there's a particular problem with overnight parking that might not necessarily be related to a parking lot on First Street, for example.
Sir, and we did discuss that amongst the staff. And I think that the idea there was to first target the solution to the problem at hand and then evaluate and come back and determine whether there's a will to go forward with expanding that parking regulation, with the understanding that of course comes with a cost. It comes with a cost in terms of staff time and effort and further regulation and signage as well.
I would assume that areas such as this, you're already spending time down there. I'm not sure there'd be additional staff time, but that's okay. But it's nice to hear that the staff is open to expanding this if we need to.
I think one of the other distinctions, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is that looking at some of the city-owned property, these parking lots are property parcels that the city owns versus some of the right-of-way dynamics with parking along the main street. So there's a little bit of nuance and distinction.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson.
Thank you, sir. Chief, what are the nature of the complaints that we're getting out of that parking lot?
So the parking lot that we're speaking about, generally the complaints are people essentially living there in automobiles, whether they're running or not, creating litter as well as human waste and deteriorating the public health of the area through that, as well as just the general overall feeling of a lack of safety because of those individuals staying there. And so to regulate that for, no indefinite stays in that parking lot will hopefully make it less appealing for people living in the city parking lot.
Are you seeing or have your guys our staff seen problems originating in that parking lot? end up nearby elsewhere.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Klebs, on section 6.02 that you pointed out on page 28, you talked about, could you give an example of where a permit is not being used in a manner consistent with the intent of the ordinance, which you kind of alluded to, or were you just speaking generally?
Certainly, and there's a little bit of nuance here as well. You know, if we may have an individual who could be storing a vehicle in essence, or a contractor that was storing a trailer, for example, in the downtown parking lot for extremely extended periods of time, denying that usage of the spot to other constituents and other users. And so again, looking at the purpose here to preserve and protect the city's public health, safety, and welfare, to offer downtown businesses, employees, and residents a mechanism to avail themselves of overnight parking for economic development. That isn't quite in alignment with the usage of these spots. And so basically, if we had someone who was abusing their permit, there's a provision to revoke it.
Okay, thanks. Any other city council questions or comments before I open it up to the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this particular ordinance or proposal? Anybody? Okay. Last call for city council comments and questions. Looking for a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Would anybody object to the city clerk reading? Or does anybody want the ordinance read in full? No? Anybody? Okay, please proceed.
General Ordinance number 23-1398. Amending the Dalles Municipal Code Title VI Traffic by creating Chapter 6.02 Overnight Parking in City-Owned Parking Lots.
Okay, now I'm looking for a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve general ordinance number 23-1398, an ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code Title VI Traffic by creating Chapter 6.02 Overnight Parking in City-Owned Parking Lots by title only.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Council Long to approve the ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code in regards to overnight parking and city-owned parking lots. Is there any more discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now on item 11A, which is a discussion item in regards to nuisance crime and community liability. Mr. Klebs.
Oh, there's a typo. You're absolutely correct. It is livability. It is not liability.
It's community livability. I almost said that right the first time.
You should have stuck to your guns. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you again in the packet is the agenda staff report. This is a slightly lengthier one with a plethora or several different items for discussion and update. And I'd like to ask you all to hold your questions until I've reviewed the entire staff report. And then we can go back and touch upon and expand upon each individual one as I've detailed. And so starting at the top and kind of the vein of much of the conversation this evening, at the March 13th City Council meeting, we received some direction to evaluate and stress test and look at a whole host of different or potential tools and programs and changes that would look at and mitigate the prevalence of nuisance crime in the community and improve community livability. Staff conducted a substantial research and outreach, brainstormed and contact other communities to stress test some of these ideas until we landed on the items included in tonight's packet. And the intent here was to better leverage existing tools and staff resources, partner with key agencies, and address some of the deficiencies that we may have in our existing infrastructure. Part of this effort, as we've been talking about tonight, were the two prior actions that you just took regarding the two previous ordinances. So again, I'm going to touch upon each one of these in my staff report, starting on item A, which is the owner authorization to enforce law. Property owners within the city of the Dells may proactively file an owner authorization to enforce law, which in essence pre-authorizes the city's police department and the Wasco County DA's office to enforce trespass and other property crimes occurring on an individual's property. Most notably or most often where it applies is when the individual is not present. And so this is a tool that currently exists and is in limited use in our community, and is one of the administrative tools that we can use and can better communicate to the community on to increase its use to address some of the concerns about trespass and some of nuisance crime on an individual's private property. Item B is a volunteer security camera registry. Again, this is a system or program that needs some additional refinement, but is also in limited use. It allows an individual within our community to confidentially file or register a private security camera or cameras that they own with the police department. This will help us create a database of cameras that detectives can use and reference when investigating a crime. It'll allow them to quickly determine if there are private cameras in the vicinity of an incident, and then they can work to contact their respective owner to request access to the footage that they may have. This program does not give the police department or the city access or direct access to the footage. It simply lets us know where private security cameras may be to aid in an investigation. As I've mentioned, this is a program that currently exists, but we need to refine it a bit further, and also is in limited use. And then item C, which is kind of related to these first two I wanted to briefly cover, is to continue working on the creation and updating of informational resources for the community. And in some, there's a whole host of toolkits and outreach resources that communities across the state and frankly across the country have developed to inform or better inform their community of the different tools that they may avail themselves. A security camera database, a trespass pre-authorization, amongst others. And so we have been developing and working in my office with my executive assistant, developing some of the materials that we could use to better communicate to our community, the different tools they have, scenario information, and updates on other developments that may be occurring with the city or with our area partners. We have that in draft form and under review, pending some of the direction we received from council this evening. Item D is a proposal that we received from Mid-Columbia Center for Living in partnership with Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, and is included in your packet as Exhibit A, a two-pager kind of summarizing this proposal. And in essence, this proposal is for Center for Living to develop a community outreach team. And I should note that I believe we do have a few people on the call, both Kelly and Jamie, I believe, who could help answer any questions that you may have after the staff report. But in summary, this proposal would have Center for Living hire 2 full-time behavioral health staff members that would work with the community and law enforcement to engage individuals who are not currently receiving the various programs that may be offered due to a variety of different dynamics. These staffers would meet regularly with individuals to help develop a relationship and a rapport with them, and would assist them when responding to a crisis and encourage an individual to more fully engage with many of the existing programs that we currently have. In essence, one of the challenges this proposed program, which would be a pilot program, would address is some of the financial reimbursement or financial constraints associated with some of this staff work that Center for Living relies upon. In gross summary, and Jamie may be able to speak to this more eloquently than I. Oh, I lost my place. I'm sorry. Center for Living receives reimbursement for services after an individual has enrolled in a program, and they work with state and federal resources to receive that reimbursement. However, oftentimes as an individual who has not chosen to or is not quite able to enroll in a particular program or has a medical necessity that rises to a certain level where Center for Living can provide those services and actually receive reimbursement. So under this program, what the request is for city financial support in partnership with Mid-Columbia Community Action Council and Center for Living to combine funding sources, local funding sources that would allow the hiring of these 2 behavioral health staff and to provide that support to those individuals in need when Center for Living may not be able to help them as easily as they could. And this also would serve as a entryway or a gateway, if you would, where these individuals are building a relationship with an individual and encouraging them to enroll and to get avail themselves of some of that additional assistance provided from Center for Living programs. So again, this would be a combination of local funds to hire these 2 staffers in this pilot project. The request is for $50,000 from the city of the Dalles, combined with $50,000 from MCAC and $50,000 for Center for Living for these 2 individual staffers. And one of the things that we're evaluating is the potential use of opioid settlement funds to support this endeavor. And so I've communicated with Wasco County, who also received opioid settlement funds. And they have I think it was an 11-page list of potential eligible uses. And so we are going through a process working with our partner to evaluate if the use of those funds is eligible and would be appropriate, but may be an ideal source to support this program. And so again, this 2-pager is included in your packet. And we have a couple individuals on the call today who hopefully will stick with us as we go through this staff report, who can answer questions on this potential program. The next 2 items, E and F, are related to the police department. The first is currently we have a seasonal watershed patrol officer position that is overseen by the police department, but is paid for out of the Public Works Department in order to patrol our watershed during the time when snowpack allows, meaning spring, summer, and fall months mostly. The proposed change here would be to eliminate this position, this watershed patrol position, and replace it with a full-time patrol officer position. We would then treat the watershed patrol duties as an assignment, similar to what we do with our NEAT, MINT, and traffic assignments. Officers can bid or apply for these duties just like they would those other assignment examples that I gave, and they can shift those duties around from year to year with some overlap in training, of course. In effect, this will increase staffing at the Dalles Police Department by roughly 0.5 FTE by replacing this seasonal position with a full-time patrol officer. Public Works would continue to pay for the time spent by the officer or the assigned officer in patrolling the watershed. So at the end of the day, we'll see a budgetary change to potentially, with the council's support, to the police department's budget. The second item is the concept of a quote overfill position. And so again, in summary, the current police department has 25 sworn officers. And when we're at full staff, we may receive indications that an officer might be considering a departure. That could be everything from a verbal comment, nothing official. We haven't received an official resignation letter or anything like that, to a fellow agency conducting a background check on one of our officers, which may serve as an indicator that they're going through an application process. We don't have a formal resignation letter yet, so it's difficult, or we can't post a position when we don't know when it will actually become available and go through that interview process. This overfill proposal would create an overfill position that would enable the city to post a position if the police chief and the city manager agree that it's very likely an officer will soon be departing. And so the department would still be considered fully staffed when they have 25 officers, but we'll have this 26 overfill position to give us some tactical flexibility, if you would, and reduce the impact a departing officer may have by allowing us to post the position and start that application process sooner. If there's support for this concept, the staff would develop needed policies and directives needed to manage along with the watershed changes. And for this overfill concept, would coordinate with the police union as well. Now, one thing I wanted to note on page 39 of your packet is the bolded section on the item F. And so if both of these provisions are changed, we'll be looking at 26 sworn officers in the police department, but we would budget for 27 to accommodate for that overfill concept. Not that we would always be staffed at 27, but it would give me the flexibility to post a position and start that application process just as soon as we can and reduce the impact to the department. And then the last item here is in regards to a 24-hour bathroom facility. So a few years ago, the city supported the renovation of the Veterans Building on downtown Federal Street to provide a 24-hour bathroom facility to our community. To my knowledge, this is the only 24-hour bathroom facility operated within the city limits. And since the bathrooms were completed, or the bathroom was completed, there has consistently been misuse and damage of the facility. And I recently ordered the closure of the bathroom to address some of these issues. Once conditions improved around the area and we were able to make some of those repairs, I reopened the bathrooms, but only on a dawn to dusk schedule, not a 24-hour schedule. The dawn to dusk schedule is exactly how we operate some of the other bathroom facilities we have, such as the Lewis and Clark Park. As a result of this change, the conditions at the bathroom area have improved, and it's my intention to continue operating these bathrooms as such. As the council knows, some time ago, we did receive a petition from some downtown business owners requesting or asking that this facility be closed permanently in its entirety. My position again is that the recent operational changes, as well as the overnight parking permit program we just discussed and passed, will address a lot of the concerns expressed in this petition that we received, and still looking to operate those bathrooms on a dawn to dusk schedule. I think one of the key challenges with operating these bathrooms, or this bathroom down on Federal Street as a 24-hour facility, is it's simply not built and designed for this use. It is not in a visible area. It's heated and cooled and is in an enclosed space that can be locked from the inside with no way of knowing if someone is inside it or not. We've had instances where someone will locate themselves in the bathroom and lock the door for extended periods of time, denying the use of this facility to other individuals, and it's simply not durably constructed. Therefore, the item for consideration this evening and for discussion is in a pursuit of continuing to provide a 24-hour facility as the city has been doing. I'm seeking council direction on the potential purchase and installation of a bathroom facility designed and built for the purpose. Most commonly known, or most commonly talked about, I could say, one of the products here would be a Portland loo. There's also various other alternatives to that branded type of public 24-hour bathroom facility that we could explore. But I've also engaged with some of my counterparts, most recently in the city of Astoria. They have a Portland loo located in their downtown that I observed and interacted with them a little bit when I was on vacation. It was top of the list. My wife was wondering what I was doing, but learned a little bit more about how it was going for them. And some of the feedback I got from the city staff from Astoria is that, it's built for that purpose. It's more resilient than their other bathrooms. It's easier to clean and maintain and can be proactively managed if conditions deteriorate, just like the bathrooms down at the Veterans Building. This item has been discussed several times with council, and the location of which has been proposed as the Arco parking lot near St. Peter's. I would desire to have it be located on the east end of that parking lot, further away from St. Peter's if we were going to put it there. For a number of different reasons. It's a highly visible and monitored parking lot. It's actually on the route for many of our patrol officers returning to the police department. We've had a recent increase in the staffing level that we have at the facilities department in order to maintain such a bathroom. We can proactively manage it, and we could potentially use some of the ARPA dollars that we received in the last couple of years to purchase a product and install it at the Arco parking lot. And so those are items A through G in my staff report. And the last page there detail some of the budget implications specifically for items D, E, F, and G. The other items are more informational and staff administrative work, but I wanted to let the council know of what we were working on, answer any questions that you may have. And so kind of going down the list here at budget implications, you have item D, that's the Mid-Columbia Center for Living Pilot Community Outreach Service Program. Detailing again, the request is for $50,000 from the City of the Dalles, matched with $50,000 from Center for Living and $50,000 from MCAC, for a total of $150 for the two staffers as discussed. And we're looking at opioid dollars and would request that the county participate in that. Therefore, the allocation from the city would be split 25 and 25 for that 50. Watershed position changes. As noted, this is a seasonal position that we would be eliminating and replacing with a full-time position. So there would be additional staff costs associated with that position. Likewise with the police overfill. Again, we'd be budgeting for an additional patrol officer to help with that transition. I would expect that it wouldn't be filled all the time, but when we have an officer departing, we need those budget resources available to fill that position and ease that transition. And then finally, I added some of the costs gathered in 2022 when the city was looking at Portland Loo or other type of 24-hour bathroom facility. And so I've included those costs roughly at that time, $140,000 with $50,000 in installation. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, or the chief of police, or some of our partner agencies represented on the call or in the audience.
So items A, B, and C are administrative issues that you can do administratively, that you're letting the council know what you would like to do there. And you're open to comments and questions as far as those go.
Correct. We are developing those as we speak, but wanted to provide this update and the theme of this topic overall. We'll be happy to answer any questions on those.
I would propose that we take these one at a time. Why don't we start with A? Does anyone have any questions on owner authorization to enforce the law? The form that private property owners can fill out to ask our police department to enforce trespass on private property. Anybody got any questions on that one? We all know what's going on with public property because of the Boise case and the Grants Pass case and this House Bill 3115. You're proposing this for private property. What about property that's owned by a nonprofit? Would that be the same as a private property?
Yeah, generally, the chief executive officer of that nonprofit or the board president would be in a position to make that authorization for the police department to enforce as well. So yes, we would accept a signature from that person.
Great.
This is new. We don't offer this currently.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well,
We do offer this, but go ahead.
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Richardson, no, this is something that the city has used sort of like on an ad hoc basis. I think at least 3 times, maybe twice in the last 18 months. This was the result. We're talking about the owner authorization to enforce, right? This stemmed from a frustrating experience I went through with our codes enforcement officer last year, with a property owner who owns a piece of land in this city, but didn't reside in this city and didn't answer any letters or calls, and it was impossible to get a hold of them. They happen to own a piece of land that is sort of just the right spot for people to trespass on and to take up camp on and to start fires on and to cause litter on. And it was a bit of a headache trying to figure out what exactly can we do about it, because it wasn't posted with any no trespassing signs. And so for all, law enforcement knows, each and every one of the people that were trespassing on that property were actually not trespassing on that property. They were actually invitees. They had the permission of the owner to be there. And so absent that understanding or a clear expression of authorization from the owner that no one was to be allowed on that property unless the owner told us who they were, we were left, in a tough spot because we were receiving complaints and there were public safety hazards that were either, anticipated or impending. And so I coordinated with the district attorney's office and we came up with that form. And so I think the emphasis for tonight's discussion is whether to sort of make that form more widely available and to sort of be proactive in our implementation there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The idea that it's right now we're doing it, but are people availing themselves of the police department without the form? So this is the new thing here is the form. Do I understand that correctly?
The new aspect of this is that it allows an individual to file a form with the police department to, in essence, proactively let the police department know that individuals on this parcel has been trespassed. And so typically what would happen is I would call the police chief, or I'd call the police department. I'd be down at the property saying, I want this individual trespassed. But if I'm not present in this community, I live on the East Coast, for example, instead of each individual case coming up, I can file this form with the police department and they can be more proactive or respond more quickly because that they have something on file versus calling or sending a letter and trying to get in contact with a property owner.
Exactly right. I just want to mention it's not designed to be limited to those individuals who reside beyond the city limits. It's intended for, if you're at work and there's no one home, but there's people on your property. If the police drive by and they see something that maybe looks like it doesn't belong, and it doesn't really matter where you are, you could even be home. This form pre-authorizes the City of the Dallas Police Department and the Wasco County District Attorney's Office to enter the premises and to trespass anybody who is located on your private property. And so for owners that own sort of unfenced areas of land within the City of the Dalles that are running into this issue, based off council's direction here tonight, I think the game plan based off the city manager's description would be to make that form perhaps post it on our website and to maybe do some outreach to sort of inform the public of the availability of this additional tool to safeguard your property.
Okay, anything else on item A? Okay, item B, volunteer security camera registry. Any questions or comments on that? Other than that's a great idea. Nope. Okay, C, creation and updating of informational resources for the community. This would be a brochure, for example.
Toolkit, if you will.
Toolkit on our website. I've seen a sample of this. I think looks very informative, and I think it'll be very helpful for the community to have. Any comments or questions on item C? Okay, item D, this is the cooperation between the city, Mid-Columbia Community Action and CFL in partnership with to hire 2 behavioral health staff members. Questions or comments? Councilor Randall.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question, and I'm not sure who could answer this, but that doesn't seem to be the type of position that would be a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday shift. What would they be like on call, or how is that going to work with the 2 individuals that would be filling that position?
I see some representatives from CFL on the Zoom meeting. Perhaps they could speak to what their vision of that program would be.
Hi.
Hi, what? Please identify yourself and answer the question. Thank you, Kelly. Go ahead. And Jamie Preston is here as well from CFL. Which one of you would like to tackle that question, or both of you?
Go for it, Jamie. Thanks, Kelly. I'm Jamie Preston. I'm the Deputy Director here at Mid-Columbia Center for Living. And right now, this is really just a concept. So there are definitely more details to be worked out. I think during our discussions with McCack and Kelly's team that we recognize that, yes, it's likely that there would be a need outside of our normal hours. And so we're thinking more strategically about placing these positions with our crisis team who are on 24 hours. And so organizationally sitting those positions there and having 2 people would be beneficial to doing some weekend work and maybe nights as well. I mean, our mobile crisis team is expanding anyway. And so their remit will be to actually do some more outreach. And we are looking, as Matthew stated very eloquently, by the way, Matthew, where we're our hands are kind of tied in terms of the engagement piece with people who are not enrolled. So this is still very much a concept, but we would hope to do outreach whenever it's needed. I don't know that 2 people could cover 24 hours, 7 days a week, though.
Well, the question is, it's not going to be a 9 to 5 type of job. I mean,
it depends on what the request is. It depends on what it is. I mean, if it's about engaging folks that are houseless downtown and needs to build relationships, or if it's actually responding to crisis, then that would be our crisis team.
Ms. Horvath, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think Jamie did a good job, and just in the conversations that we have had since we've had some COVID funding up until recently that's helped us have outreach staff members. You are right that it's not a 9 to 5
realistically kind of position. And I think that we would want to support CFL from our vantage point and experience doing some outreach work, and also think about coordination with partners if we're able to make these positions a reality with the funding that's being requested, and ultimately talk about what the best way was to schedule those shifts, and ideally probably have the 2 staff members be on a staggered schedule so that we could have as much coverage as possible based on times that community partners and other folks recommended we most needed them. So the goal would be to fund a pilot project, then also test that out. And then if it goes well and we decide we need to expand it or something, then we could also talk about additional coverage at that point.
Thank you. Mr. Klebs?
I think the other thing I'd like to mention is, as we just talked about, there will be a substantial amount of work to figure out all the different details of the program, to develop some of the performance metrics or how we're evaluating this pilot concept. Is it working? Is it being effective? And that's a lot of the work that staff can do in partnership with MCAC and Center for Living, but didn't want to go through a process where we spent a substantial amount of time figuring out all these different detailed elements if the council was not supportive of potentially allocating such funds. And so again, looking for some consensus by council, if this is something that is you want to learn more about, that you may be potentially in support of, we would go do that work to detail that out, bring back some additional information or answer questions that the council may have for further consideration, as well as an update on whether or not opioid money can be used.
Council Randall, did you have another question?
Yeah, I know. That was it. Thanks.
That's it. Okay. Council Runyon.
Was there a plan B if the opioid money cannot be used?
So if the opioid money cannot be used, I would work with the finance director, looking at potential other sources of city funds that could be used, general fund dollars or an alternative funding source that could be used. But it's our hope that the opioid money would be a slam dunk for this. As I said, there's about 11 different pages of eligible uses that it's actually, even though there's 11 pages, it's actually quite restrictive. And so this actually may be a great use for those dollars. And so that's what we're exploring first.
So the answer was no. At this point, we don't have a plan B. We'd go into research mode if this fails.
Yeah, we may look at the general fund resources that we have and have to bring back something additional for council consideration.
Other questions?
I'm sorry. That was a meaningful look, Mr. Mayor. May I comment briefly?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I had a question, but go ahead.
Well, not to cut you off, but as an unproven local, project, be great to see what happens, 6 months or a year down the road. But I think it's a great idea. I think there's a couple of other communities that have used non-emergency response, and reports on that seem to have been really positive. So I'm hopeful. I think it's, I'd like to hear the chief's thought, but my sense is that it would both expand our potential response to people who are both causing and having problems, and also perhaps sort of relieve a little bit of that pressure on our police staff. So
before you answer that, Mike, I wanted to emphasize that there is no intent on the part of these 2 individuals to take the place of a police officer. And I was going to ask, if we accept that premise, if you could talk about the relationship of the police department to these 2 individuals and more. And I think that kind of follows up with what Councilor Richardson is asking.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. You have to remember that many of these people that would be engaged by this new community service outreach team are service resistant and very often have a lot of trepidation in speaking with the police. And so very often it may be best if they are approached proactively without law enforcement present. Of course, we'll be there for the safety and security of those outreach workers anytime that we're requested. I don't really view these positions as taking away from the police so much. If a person's in full-blown crisis and acting out in the streets, that's still an appropriate police response. But to form the relationships like CFL was mentioning, go out and try and coax and encourage and cajole these people into services so they can increase their standard of living and their own wellness. I think that's really the idea here going forward. And the police department, everybody that I've spoken to there is very positive and encouraged about this. It does appear to be a good use of opioid funds. We're looking for a good use for those funds, and this might be it if permissible.
Mayor Mays, I have a comment.
Counselor McGoldrick.
While I was on outreach in Washington DC, I was at Reagan International, and there was a woman, and I struck up a conversation. And I told her I was from the Dalles, Oregon, and she says, "Oh, my brother works there." Well, he did, but he was working at MCMC in the emergency. And she said that he was just burned out, and he was tired of all the conflict, and he was tired of being spat upon, cursed at, all of those things. But officers will bring people that are having some type of a exposure. And what happens is the officers will have to, because of response time, maintain a long period of time there at the hospital. I see this as potentially being a way to bring someone from the outside without being an officer to deflate and maybe help in that situation. We hope that Adventist will also add the capability of addressing some of the individuals with some of the serious problems that we're seeing that are coming in with mental health, with drug abuse, with violence in general. So in my opinion, I think this is a potential for adding to what we do, and it will improve the response time. It will relieve police officers and let them return to their duties. So I think this is a very positive, and I fully support the use of funds for this.
Okay, any other questions or comments on D? Okay, E, the watershed position becoming a full-time position with spending half their time in patrol or neighborhood enforcement, et cetera. Any comments on E or questions? Okay. Oh, Counselor Runyon.
Thought I heard Matthew, city manager, talk about this, but maybe I missed it. So not in this budget, but you hope in the next budget that it would transfer the funding from Public Works to the police department? Is that it?
So what would potentially happen if this position and the overfill position are supported by council, is I would work with staff to bring back the needed budget amendments to allocate those resources in this fiscal year. We could potentially incorporate some of these changes in the next fiscal year, but in particular for the watershed position and some of the recruitment that we have going on at the police department, I'd like to be recruiting for those just as soon as possible. And so both of these actions would require further approval by council, and we bring them back for your consideration likely in September.
So the answer was eventually it'd be moved over from Public Works to law enforcement.
And so to that question and specifically, and thank you for pointing that out, how the Public Works transfer is accomplished is through the administrative services transfers that we do. It's taken into consideration when we are looking at the charges that we have for the Public Works Department, the library, and the airport. This one would specifically be for Public Works. And so Public Works would continue to, in effect, pay for that half of the position, just as they always have, with a slight increase due to the full-time nature of the position. So there'll be a slight increase due to some of the benefit costs.
Okay, anything else on E? Item F, the overfill position. You authorize and budget for an additional police officer that would fill in or would be authorized and budgeted for in case of any separation. Any comments or questions on that?
I think it's a good proactive method of using resources that we have. So I think it's a good idea.
Counselor Richardson.
If we were fully staffed consistently, for the last couple of years and what looks like for the horizon, then I would say this seems unnecessary, but we aren't. We know that police and many professionals around the state and around the West are having, issues keeping good people, and we want to. So given the current circumstances, I think it's an imaginative and thoughtful way to try and keep us with a consistent level of staffing. And I think it's worth supporting.
Well, if I might add two comments, one, just a frank comment. It's a concept stolen from other agencies, but they've employed it to good use. And the second comment is that, we'd like to get this position or this tool in place so we can make use of it. But with a police department that's down several officers, it's also not needed at this time because we have several positions vacant, so we have them posted. So it's a tool for the future that I think we'd like to have in place once we get back up to full staff.
Understood.
Okay, item G, a 24-hour bathroom facility at the city parking lot near that's 3rd Street, right?
Correct.
3rd and Liberty. Any questions or comments on that? Councilor McLaughlin.
I'll go ahead. I firmly stand in opposition to locating a Portland Loo on the Arco parking lot, since I was one of the first to propose this location as a possible site after taking into account business owners and people located in this area. I now believe a better location must be found. I would rather spend the money to help, if in a perfect world, to help fund a drug and alcohol treatment facility in our city, or help fund a group home to better house individuals that find themselves without a home. That would be a better use of the money, in my opinion. 150,000 plus 50. I think that's low. I think it's going to be at least $250,000 to locate a loo in the downtown. And I think that there are some alternatives that we need to investigate before spending that kind of money.
Okay, any other Council Runyon?
Well, as the counselor in a former life who was very involved with the VSO, the Veteran Service Office, and always had the idea about making that, having a public door on there and bringing that to our previous city manager, I'm just totally devastated by what happened, and I want to close that up and put it back the way it was, with just an indoor and people come into the office, as far as I'm concerned. And the reason to put it on an outside door, in my view, thinking of normal folks, was that it was a distraction to the office work that was going in when people were coming in from buses at that time and other things, and disrupting office work. Where's the restroom? Where's the bathroom? That kind of thing. So an outside door always seemed good, and I brought that forward, and that turned out to be just a terrible idea based on what we have seen. I'm not in favor of the location for any bathroom, whether it's a loo or whatever you want to call it, at the Arco parking lot there, without really would like to talk with the folks in charge of the church museum across the street. That's a big one. And I don't know if that's been fully addressed or not with those folks, but I just don't think that's a location. Based on what's happened when we put the door on the outside of the VSO and who ended up using that primarily, it was not tourists. It was not people, regular people who come here to visit, as was presented to us some time ago. I think it's going to be an element that causes a problem. And I don't want to be a part of that. So I will be voting no on that if it ever comes to us. I know this is discussion only, but at this point, I need some more reasons to go forward, especially in that location. It's just too full view, which is good for one reason, for patrols, et cetera. And it could be very bad for some other reasons that we're seeing all over town anyway.
Other comments and questions? Councilor Long?
Go ahead, please.
Oh, go ahead.
You're on.
No, I'll respond after you go.
I think that locating a public restroom on the corner of Second at the new annex facility makes better sense. Where the swimming pool once stood, that is highly visible. It's also in a placement where having some supervision over it would be possible on that corner. I've also proposed an idea of building a public bathroom, whether it's a loo. I'm not in opposition of a loo or any other public facility, but I believe it needs to have a groundskeeper or a caretaker that monitors. And how would that be done? I have some proposals for that as well. But it does need to have facilities that provide supervised protection at night. And I had looked at Lewis and Clark, where there's facilities already there. There's already camera surveillance. The only thing we're missing is a groundskeeper and someone that would be there to allow admission at night after hours. That person could maintain a day job, half-time job, but somehow they would be given room and board for being on site. They would also clean the facility. So that's kind of an idea that I think would be the only way of protecting against vandalism and misuse, would be to have someone there to monitor at night. And I have some ideas surrounding that as well. And that's why I say use current facilities, not necessarily at the transportation, but Lewis and Clark Park, perhaps building a facility at the edge of the aquatic center. There's a piece of property that's owned by Chamber on the west side. And in conjunction with the new walkway through the Mill Creek walkway, that might lend itself to that development. So at least looking at those possibilities long range, not just a short-term solution to our problem.
So I thought you were, on your first comment, you were opposed to the idea of a 24/7 restroom and the location, but
No, I'm not opposed to the restroom,
just the location.
just the location.
Okay, good.
And then I followed up by saying, in a perfect world, I would rather have that money, $250,000 that would be invested in either a facility that would drug and alcohol treat in our community, or a place that we had some type of a mental illness facility, a house, a boarding house, something like Bridges to Change. If we had something that located in our community, I would rather our monies go towards supporting something like that in conjunction with CFL and helping them in their endeavors to alleviate or ease some of the mental issues that we're seeing on our streets in the Dalles. And there are many.
Counselor Long?
Yeah, so I think the point of this is to give direction to staff on whether or not we want a 24-hour bathroom facility, and exactly what that's going to look like is to be determined if we tell them that that is what we want. I'm well on the record for being supportive of Portland Loo, not because of the name of it, but because of all the research that went into it by a couple of community members and myself. And a lot of things that keep coming up repeatedly as reasons to not do this have already been addressed. And I feel like maybe we just have to go over it again. But, you know, the loo really does address all the issues that we've talked about. So the vandalism, the fact that it's nearly indestructible. Yes, there is cost up front. That is very true. The cost only went up because we delayed doing this a couple of years ago. But the fact is, I'd be curious to know from the city manager exactly how much we've spent on trying to use an existing bathroom and how much damage and how many times we had to redo that. I think that we'd be surprised at how much we've already put into that bathroom when we could have just done it once and done it right. The concept of the loo is something that can be easily managed as far as both being hosed out and also being supervised to make sure, because it has space at the bottom, you can see if someone is in there or not. It has blue lighting so that people can't shoot up in there because they can't see their veins. It's available to people whether or not they're homeless or mentally ill, or they're like me and they're walking downtown and need a toilet. We have people downtown who have businesses who are tired of people going to the bathroom, peeing and pooping on in their area is disgusting for all of us. And we're trying to renovate the First Street, and we don't want people using that as a toilet either. So we have to provide a place. People have to go to the bathroom. That's just the reality. And so this Portland Loo flushes. It's not a porta potty that you have to pump. It can be cleaned out. It can be hosed out. It's, it's been tried and true a bunch of different places. We need something, whether it's this or something else. Astoria has one, Cascade Locks has something, but definitely not as easily managed, but they're also a smaller community. We need something for us. And clearly not having a bathroom is not working. So to me, the question is, where are we going to put it? And are we going to get one or two? Are we not going to have any? That's not even an option as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
So it appears that you're advocating the Portland Loo, and I'll bring to your attention San Diego, which removed all of their Portland Loos from their city because of additional problems that they could not deal with in their city. So San Diego, and I don't know what other cities have removed the Portland Loo in particular. And
That's
if it was
actually a very old news story. I've told you a couple of times, and that was the original version of the Loo, and all those problems have been fixed. But I don't really care. I just want city manager to do the research and bring it back to us, and we can know what the facts are, not
Fine.
arguing old stuff.
I'm not going to argue with you either. So that's my position. That's what I feel is in the best interest of our community. And that's it.
Anybody else?
I guess I would support, I do think we need a facility like this that's bulletproof and withstand the abuse it's going to get. We know it's going to get the abuse. The big question is going to be, is one going to be enough, and where do you locate it?
How do you feel about the suggested location?
If they're willing, I would assume that they would have to agree to that. You talk about the annex. Is that?
Oh,
that what you're
well,
talking
the
about?
proposal from the staff is to put it at the Arco parking.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm not so comfortable with that. But the reasons stated by others.
We're not making a decision tonight. We're deciding whether to support the staff or direct the staff to do more research on this or to drop it. And I say, let's do some more research because it's not settled in my mind. I argued for it, was it a year and a half ago when we were at budget time and went through this round and round, and
Well, before,
feel like we put good money into it, but we haven't solved the matter at hand.
yeah, I don't think the problem's been solved at all.
Not at all.
Whether I personally feel we need a facility. I think that this particular facility is borderline indestructible. It's not unattractive from what I've seen. Where it goes, it's probably another question, but do you feel you have enough? I don't know that you've had any real direction to do this additional research here.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can make a few comments, I think the first one out of the gate is that the city for many months and years now has provided a 24-hour bathroom facility. So that is a service that we have provided to this community for some time now. The direction that I've given to my staff is to operate those on a dawn to dusk schedule moving forward. Both in response to some of the downtown business concerns that we've heard, as well as due to some of the use and damage that's been occurring at that facility. And so part of the intent here was to get council feedback on directing staff or supporting staff's efforts in evaluating alternative facilities that would better fulfill that service that we have been providing. I think through this process, I know we use the word often, Portland Loo, but in the years where Portland Loo has been designed and produced, there's a whole host of variety of different types of bathrooms that we could employ that are designed with the same kind of objective. And so if this council wanted me to continue to do some of that research, we can evaluate some of the different options, not just the Portland Loo, but other facilities that could be purchased. As the council noted a moment ago, it is a hefty price tag, certainly over my spending authority, and it would be coming back to council to award anyways, any kind of procurement like that. But again, didn't want to go through and do that effort, do that work, if the council wouldn't be supportive of it coming back. And then the final item here is again, the Arco lot was brought up. simply as part of the discussion that was from previously. We can certainly continue to brainstorm and think about other potential locations that may address some of the council's concerns.
How do you feel about the suggestion that it go over by the new annex?
I would need to talk to them first.
Yeah, right. That's what I thought, but you don't have a position on it independent of that.
I would be happy to talk to them first.
Okay.
Would you have a talk with all of the neighbors in the area and just have that discussion and hash it out, noodle it out amongst the entities and folks?
I have had a few conversations with different business owners, and it runs the spectrum. A little bit of hesitation and trepidation.
Yeah.
The kind of unknown of what impact it may have. Even after talking about some of the management tools that we could employ, if it starts to generate a lot of trash and litter and misuse, we can shut it down, just like we have the bathroom down on Federal Street, and conditions improved quite dramatically. But there is some concern from individuals about that unknown. There's other individuals that I've spoke to who are very supportive of it, that they recognize that there needs to be a 24-hour bathroom of some kind in the facility. In particular, if we're going to address a constituent or a community member, defecating or urinating in public, if they don't have a place to go. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, everything's closed. What do we expect them to do without a 24-hour facility? So there's that dynamic as well.
Are the concerns that you have listened to mostly concern the location or just the idea of the loo or the 24/7 bathroom itself?
I wouldn't say it's the location. The individuals that I've spoken with is their proximity to it. So, again, if we put it on the Arco lot, for example, some of the neighbors around that location are going to be concerned. We put it by the annex, for example. Some of those same neighbors will be concerned. It's down at Federal Street at the Veterans Building. Some of those neighbors are concerned. So it's a very, I think, reasonable concern to have about establishing a facility like that and what some of the unintended consequences may be.
I have a question. So when people are talking about the concerns that they have, what are some of the specific concerns? I mean, if it's a bathroom where you can see underneath and people can't go in there, and if it's a big open parking lot, so people can't camp around it or be in it without people knowing, this is a real question. It's not like a gotcha question. It's like, what is the concern about it being there other than people will go there to use the bathroom? Like what negative?
Yep. So one of the concerns is, what prompted my closure of the Federal Street bathrooms initially is that, there was damage to that bathroom done, but there were also quite a few individuals who had established campsites that had really kind of established themselves around that bathroom, which had implications for others using the bathroom. They didn't feel safe going down and using that bathroom. They were denied access there because they were blocking some of the pathways to that bathroom. And there's some concern that would occur even at the new proposed location, which is kind of that balance between a location that's very visible and can be monitored, but it's also very visible, and that same kind of behavior could occur again. I'm not saying it would, that's just a concern.
Right. But we have ordinances and we just dealt with some nuisance stuff to make that something that we could now react to. And because it's more visible, it's easier for the police department to deal with it. And the citizens all see it. It's not just down on First Street where you don't know unless you go around the corner.
Well, so I don't disagree with you, but we are certainly limited on, an individual being on public property or camping on public property. That's why one of the tools that we employed at the Federal Street building was to close that bathroom temporarily to allow those repairs to be made, but also to communicate to individuals around that behavior does have a negative impact on that bathroom. We want to make sure that it's available for everybody to use. So we do have some of those tools, as you mentioned, but we also still have some limitations on public property.
So you do think it is actually possible that we could have a problem of people hanging out around that bathroom, setting up their camps to be close to a bathroom and us not doing anything about it, and that they would just be there as a permanent fixture?
I think that there runs some risk of that occurring. I didn't mean to imply that there wasn't anything we would do about it or we couldn't do about it. Just that dynamic may manifest and we need to respond to it.
That can't be responded to.
in a couple of different ways, such as closing the bathroom, for an example, affecting some of those repairs, police outreach and communication to the individuals, basically making sure that we're managing the facility as best as possible.
Did Astoria say that they had problems like that?
They reported that they don't have any more problems than their other bathrooms that they have. So they have some facilities similar to what we have at the Lewis and Clark Park, but they operated those on a similar dawn to dusk schedule as we do. The Portland Loo is designed to be that 24-hour bathroom. You still have people who, put things down the toilet, for example, and that needs to be maintained and cleaned out, but not anything worse than their other bathrooms.
Counselor McLaughlin.
I did some research into the Portland Loos, and the reports are 5 and 6 times maintenance are going in there during a given day. And the increased maintenance is going to have to be considered as well. And we face that with just this. How many times a day do we clean the facilities at the transportation center?
I mean, that's a very good point, that we often have to clean and maintain the facilities at the transportation center. I think one of the distinctions here, though, is that the Portland Loo is designed to better withstand and be more easily maintained than the current facility we have, which is why this item has kind of cropped back up, is that the current 24-hour bathroom facility that we have has significant challenges with it. And this may be a better alternative.
I had discussions with some building owners in Portland downtown, and they would prefer not to have the Loos in Portland. So just taking that in consideration, and I would like to look at other cities that have had Loos installed. I bring up San Diego. Yes, maybe it's old, but it's still, it was removed. Seattle has curtailed some of theirs. I don't know what other cities have purchased and installed, and whether or not they're still in operation, or they have been modified, or the expense has gotten so out of hand that they can't afford it, or the vandalism has increased so that they had to close them for just like what we have now. And that defeats doing what we're planned to do, is to install a Loo in the city. I still would like to look at finding a way to man that, or having supervision so people would still have access. And I think along with increased surveillance and using some of the new technology that's available, and having a way of releasing the door so people can use it especially at night. And then during the day, it would just be open for use for anyone in the public. I want to earmark things for public use, and not just specifically to address a problem with one small portion of our community, but it needs to be served by everyone, and everything focused in that light. Does that make sense? Good.
One of the things about this particular location is that it's 2 blocks west of the police station on a one-way street. I would think that that location lends itself to having patrol going by there many times a day.
As you know, that's a choke point in our community, and we are past that all the time. And so there would be good visibility. We've also, as Councilor McLaughlin mentioned, we've had some good luck with our burgeoning system of surveillance cameras around town, and perhaps in scoping such a facility, a video camera with a live feed up to dispatch and into the police department is warranted as a part of the cost. So we can keep an eye on it even while we're in the squad room writing reports, or on my desk taking care of administration, or up at the dispatch center while they're waiting for calls to come in. So it's another possibility to expand the safety and security of that facility and sort of ensure our investment.
Good. Okay, any other, before I open it up to the public, anybody else? And you feel you have sufficient,
I feel what my
Direction?
main takeaway from this is that the council would like me to do a bit more due diligence on the concept of a 24-hour bathroom facility, such as a Portland Loo, if it's equivalent, most notably on its location.
does that pretty well summarize it as far as you guys are concerned? Okay. All right, is anybody in the public want to weigh in on any of these 7 items? Ms. Farquharson.
Good evening, Lisa Farquharson with the Dallas Chamber. I'll try to make this quick.
I just want to highlight each one of them. I had both Matthew come to my office and Mayor Mays and talk to me about these different things because as many of you know, we're kind of in the middle and the hub of a lot of traffic and situations. And we've done a lot of calls in the last 3 or 4 weeks regarding safety and other issues. So owner with authorization form, we've already done that verbally with our police department and it does work. I will let you know that we've called in from my house because I can see the ring and if there's a situation and it's like, look, if they're on the property at any time and you know which ones are the issues, you have authorization to trespass. And that has worked tremendously and taken the stress off of my team and I of trying to 24/7 monitor our property. So that does work. The security camera file registry with the police. We have 4 rings and I am quite fine if everybody knows. The police have full access to those rings. We have at least 7 or 8 officers with logins to our ring cameras. We have 1 on each exposure of the building. And it has been very helpful in some other cases where there's been a chase or trying to find a suspect that they knew went by our property area. And so they can tell they've scanned through the cameras. And so it has been helpful. We do have a good viewing point of that. And then the toolkits, awesome job. That is exactly what our businesses are asking for is a process, a procedure, the steps to take, who to contact and what to do so that they're doing everything similar and properly within our community so that we can all mitigate some of these issues that are happening with the houseless and our safety. So I think it's a great idea. We will help distribute that readily. And then you went to the proposal with the 2 people with MCAC. I am in favor of this. I think 1, it gives us people on the ground that might be able to help mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing on our corner because we know that those are behavioral. We know that those are addiction. We can tell every day what has come out and what is going on. That we know these people by name and we know which ones to close and lock the door. So we feel like having 2 people who are trained in this area with their feet on the ground is an answer for us. We appreciate those efforts tremendously. So that we feel like is a really good forward movement. And then you talked about, let's see if I can even go in the order. I'm not going to worry about E and F because that's just provides more feet on the ground and patrolling our areas. The other thing that the 2 people from MCAC allows our police officers to be concentrated on other issues. If they have those people dealing with those, it just is a bigger presence and more people on that team. So to the bathroom, we'll just go right to there. Matthew explained to me what was going on. I was very familiar with the Portland Loo and the claims of what it would do, how it would help, almost indestructible. I just saw some with some great artwork back there. Corliss has amazing pictures of some in another state, by the way. We need something. I'm just going to say that straight up. I'm tired of the chamber being defecated on. Okay, we're your visitor center. We have homes behind us that are having the same issues. We have businesses to our east that are having the same issues. We're having issues all through the creek bed. We need a solution that is safe, well lit, mostly as indestructible as we can get. And that is there. The spot, I don't have an answer. I really don't. Matthew brought up the ARCO and explained the exposure, the ability for our police to patrol it. And I would have said, I told him I didn't know. I'm hesitant, but hopeful. And that's really what we are, is we don't know. And that's because of the fear of what we've seen done for destruction. Maybe this would solve it. I don't have the answer to that. Now, what I just saw Corliss show me a picture of is like a piece of art. And that would actually look great in that parking lot. But to be honest, guys, I don't have a good spot. Everybody is not in my backyard.
So that's everybody's response is going to be that. So where do we take that risk? How do we measure that out? But I'm going to tell you straight up, we need something because I'm tired of cleaning it up with a shovel. And that's just flat out the facts right there. I do want to commend you guys on all of these great ideas. I know it's not a solution to solve all, but it definitely is steps in mitigating some of these issues that we have. And I feel like you've taken some really good measures. The parking overnight is huge. I'll say that one's going to save me so much strife during Cherry Festival. But these are great. I commend you on this hard work. It is going to make a difference. And the biggest difference is community coming alongside and working with you on this. So I want to say thank you as the Chamber of Commerce and what you guys are doing here.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment either on Zoom or in the audience? Last call. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. On these issues, I think we have sufficient direction on all of them. And I think the jury is still out on item G, the 24/7 bathroom facility. Right? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I just say thank you to the staff for bringing back, a real honest and thoughtful set of answers or proposed answers to our request back in March. Appreciate it.
I echo those. Thanks.
On behalf of all staff who helped and was involved in this effort, thank you.
Okay, one more to go. This is going to be a discussion item regarding abandoned shopping carts. Mr. Cleaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Home stretch here, maybe, knock on wood. As a discussion item in your packet is a discussion about abandoned shopping carts, as you mentioned a moment ago. Again, this is in the same vein as the direction given by City Council to staff to look at different ways to address some of the nuisance concerns and community livability that we've been working through. This item in particular has been expressed by both citizens and some of the members of this council, some of the concern around the presence of abandoned shopping carts throughout the community, off-site from properties where shopping cart owners have provided them for their customer use. We've conducted substantial outreach with other cities, local owners and grocer associations on this topic and sent out letters on July 12th, I believe, to every business owner that staff could identify that uses shopping carts to let them know that this item would be on the agenda for discussion. That includes Bimart, Coastal, Dollar Tree, Fred Meyer, Goodwill, Grocery Outlet, Joann Fabrics, Rite Aid, Safeway, Sawyer's, Staples, Home Depot, US Foods, and Walgreens. And so in some, staff is proposing or is bringing to the council for discussion, leveraging or using a particular state ORS 98.515, which I've detailed in the staff report, which addresses unauthorized appropriation of a shopping cart. An ordinance created under this ORS would be a civil ordinance, not a criminal ordinance, and it would regulate retailers and require them to do particular things to mitigate the presence of abandoned shopping carts throughout the community. In summary, kind of detailed more fully on the second page of the staff report, but in summary, it requires postage of signage on the property and on the carts themselves, the establishment of a toll-free hotline for community members or staff to report an abandoned shopping cart, and requires that the owner of the shopping cart retrieve them within a particular time frame or face a potential penalty. One of the nuances here that staff's been working on and where some of my intention comes from is in how we're defining what an abandoned shopping cart is. And that's kind of on the middle of the staff report on the second page. And so looking at an abandoned shopping cart as being a shopping cart that is not being actively used by anybody, it's been removed from the owner's premises without their consent, is located on either public or private property, and is empty or more or less empty or does not contain personal property of value or sanitary property. The rationale behind this definition is to focus enforcement efforts on shopping carts that have unequivocally been abandoned and get them returned to their owners while avoiding some adverse impacts on vulnerable community members and personal property. Under this definition, every shopping cart off-site from an owner's premises may not be described as abandoned. However, it would apply to a significant number of the shopping carts that we observe on a day-to-day basis through the community. And it's my hope or our hope that this an ordinance using or leveraging ORS 98.515 would result in a significant decrease in shopping carts throughout the community. Hate to give a particular percentage. It won't address them all, but it would potentially have some real positive impacts on addressing a majority of those shopping carts. As I said, we've conducted some outreach to local owners and grocery associations, as well as other cities who have employed local ordinances that regulate these shopping carts in a similar manner, who have reported success in mitigating some of the shopping carts abandoned throughout their community. And as such, wanted to bring this concept or this item to the city council for consideration. If there's increase in moving forward, staff will continue to do our research and effort on this topic to bring back potential ordinance for council consideration at a future date. But kind of wanted to do this check-in again in the kind of spirit of tonight's main topic. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions, comments?
Go forth and prosper.
You know, I'm going to have some comments. I believe all of the steps that you outlined, 1 through 4, are positive. And I think if implemented will decrease the number of shopping carts taken off from property. But one thing that isn't is the fact that, well, it does identify that unauthorized appropriation of a shopping cart is a crime and it's theft. And if it's theft on a public right of way, and if an officer sees that theft of an item, then what we've been doing is not taking any action. And what that does is it promotes in the community people saying, well, the police don't do anything about it. I've heard that over and over again. And it's one of those things that I think that if we're going to do this, we should also incorporate that if property is stolen and if a person is wheeling it down the street, that an officer stop. And I think it would only be for a short time because people will figure out that it's more hassle than not to do that. So they would be warned to return the property to its proper place. And if they did it, then there would be no foul, nothing done. And they would be thanked for returning the property and not do it again. If they do it a second time, then you can increase the increments. And then if it gets to a point where people are just stealing property and it's a criminal act, and then it should be dealt with in the court. And that way it gets to the court system, and then it could be addressed at that point. And I'm also encouraging the return of municipal court from the county court back to the city under our umbrella, because I think we'll have better control over some of these items to actually decrease the occurrence of this particular issue, which is theft of items. And then it would also be increase the nuisance so that we can control some of the things that are happening in our community, like people entering private places to scope things out and to, at night would be to go into the property to thieve. And those things are happening and they're increasing, I believe, in our community. If you look at the 911 reports and review both the Dallas Police, the county, those incidences are increasing. And that concerns me, and it concerns a lot of community members in our city. We want to keep our city safe, supportive, and livable. And those are all the things that I believe we need to address.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. Can I get a motion to continue our meeting beyond 8:30?
We got 5 minutes, right?
Give us
Uh,
5 minutes, I think.
I I've given my,
Well, you took 5 minutes.
well, thank you.
Counselor.
Well,
You didn't say anything-
it needed to be said.
Yeah, and you didn't say anything I disagreed with. So, okay.
finished.
Done.
You want to work for, well, it's,
Let's finish this
Yeah.
discussion. I move that we finish our conversation beyond 8:30 if necessary.
okay. Second, anybody?
I'll second it.
Been moved by Council Richardson and seconded by Council Randall. We go beyond 8:30 if necessary. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you. Who would like to comment next?
Well,
If not, I mean, I have a question, but did you want to comment?
yeah, I will. I think Dan Richardson does too. I just want to say that I think that this is a good first step. And I had talked with city manager about it. I think that one of the things I mentioned to him is that a next step, which is not required to take this step, would be to solve the reason that people are taking the shopping carts in the first place, which is that they need a legal way to carry their stuff around. And so there are things that we could potentially do, or maybe not necessarily the city, but could be done in the community. But for now, I think that this is a really good first step and is going to take care of a lot of it without causing strife or conflict in trying to retrieve shopping carts for people unwilling to give them up.
Thank you. Council, anybody else?
Yeah, all right. I agree with Councilor McLaughlin's concern for community safety and livability. I don't know that I'm quite ready to support having our police who are already busy stopping and citing or arresting, tackling people with shopping carts, which is that's the path we're talking about going down. I'm not quite there. In fact, I was a little skeptical until I started thinking about this and put a little bit of thought into it. But it does seem to me as analogous to abandoned shopping carts as an analogy to or similar to graffiti, and we don't have a lot of our public places overwhelmed with graffiti because we make an energetic response. We have an energetic local response to it. When it pops up, we try and take care of it. And I think we do need to respond to shopping carts. I do wonder if this is the simplest, most direct route to doing that, and maybe it is. I still wonder remind me, why can't we just tag and fetch them ourselves and throw them somewhere and be done with it, as opposed to going through an ordinance and a phone number and.
Well, so for some of the abandoned shopping carts, staff will retrieve them
Yeah.
and try and return them to a property owner. Sometimes a shopping cart may not be labeled. Maybe it was labeled, now it's no longer labeled, doesn't have some of that verbiage on it. And this would involve the local owner being required or being involved in that retrieval process. And so it wouldn't be necessarily staff returning these shopping carts as the first step. But what would happen is an individual could contact this toll-free hotline, for example, Safeways, just to use an example, and say, hey, you have an abandoned shopping cart at the corner of X and X. Safeway would be required to either using their own staff or through a contracted staff to go down and retrieve that shopping cart within a certain period of time. That is their personal property, and we want to work with them to the best of our ability and incentivize them to go retrieve their personal property in a manner that doesn't, cause a conflict with an individual who might have property in that, or maybe using some of that balance.
You sent out letters to this list of stores you gave us. I believe you said you communicated with these folks. What was the response? What kind of responses did you get?
So I didn't get any responses to the letters that we mailed out on July 12th. I think it may be prudent for the mayor, if you so chose, to see if there's any individuals in the audience who may have comment tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. I think it may be appropriate if the mayor was interested in asking if there are any members in the audience tonight to comment. But I didn't receive any correspondence, phone calls or emails since we mailed out that letter. Some months ago, I did meet with several different grocery store owners and kind of talked about this concern and what they may be doing and how they might be impacted by the theft of shopping carts and abandoned shopping carts. That's where I garnered some of the information from some of the larger grocery stores in our community who are employing some anti-theft devices. They do have this on the radar. That's not a tool that may be availed of every business in town.
Sure.
It's kind of an expensive tool at times, and their deployment has been kind of mixed. But that was some of the correspondence that I had.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, just one, could you summarize your discussion with the executive director of the Grocers Association who represents grocery stores throughout the Pacific Northwest?
Mr. Carr, was that exactly what you were going to
It's exactly what I was going to just say.
Let me rephrase the question. Mr. Kara, could you please summarize your
You bet.
discussion with that gentleman?
You bet, Mr. Mayor. Sort of just to dovetail off of Councilor Richardson's question about, the retailer's response to this proposal. As the city manager indicated, it seems that none of the, how many was it? Maybe 20 local retailers. I think it was an attempt to have a comprehensive effort to list and mail and contact each and every retailer and to invite them to this meeting. And so maybe there are some in the crowd tonight. We did not receive any written responses. However, as part of our diligence here, I reached out to several entities and organizations. This is a state statute that authorizes the city to pursue this course of action. And so we are not reinventing the wheel when it comes to this issue. And so that means, there should be other jurisdictions out there that would be happy to talk to us about it, to sort of share their experiences. And so the first step there was to contact some other jurisdictions that have similar types of ordinances as the ones being proposed here already on the books. Some go as far back as 2008, some are much more recent than that, and to sort of get their impression generally of how are things working out. To answer the mayor's question, the president of the Northwest Grocery Association just turned on her camera and she's here in this meeting. Her name is Amanda Dalton. I spoke with her last week. Amanda, thank you for joining us tonight. And boy, what a meeting it's been. And so to sort of summarize our conversation, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. You and I talked. I identified some questions that I had after reviewing your this statute and its implementation. And I was directed to your office and your organization by a police officer in the Coos Bay Police Department who indicated that the Northwest Grocery Association is sort of the driving factor and the driving force behind some of this legislation initially. I contacted Sean Miller, one of your policy analysts, and we talked about the implementation of this at the state level. You and I talked about some of its successes, some of the ways that you've streamlined access to contractors for the cart retrieval portion of this ordinance, and how generally, historically in Oregon, this all sort of came about because of a patchwork of ordinances at different tiers and different counties and cities throughout the state, sort of making it a bit more of a frustrating experience for the retailing industry to keep up with all the different dynamics of cities and counties and their different laws. And so this is really an effort on behalf of your entire industry to streamline the process by adopting a state statute that would preempt local regulation.
So do you have any comments, Ms. Dalton, you'd like to make?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, Amanda Dalton here on behalf of the Northwest Grocery Association. Appreciate the opportunity. And I know you guys have had a long night tackling some really important issues. Appreciate the time and the outreach by your city attorney. I think he summarized the conversation well. I would just offer, we want to be partners with you. We know this is a challenge for cities all over the state. I shared with him as well, we're starting to get calls from our neighbors to the north as well. So we're not alone. I will say, and was involved in the original legislation, which is probably 10 or so years old and fairly outdated. I think some of the concerns raised by council tonight is fair, and the conversation around shopping carts is obviously much different today than it was 10 years ago. And so interested in the city attorney's kind of creative abandoned shopping cart definition. It's the first time we've seen that. I think it's the right conversation for council to be having. I think your retailers will also ask for a little bit of grace as it relates to some of the timelines. These are challenging issues to address. It's challenging for us to put bodies on the ground. As your city attorney mentioned, we do run a cart retrieval program for our members across the state. We pick up around 700 or so carts a week, but that requires bodies kind of in the metro area, Salem, Roseburg, Bend, Redmond, and then just moved into Southwest Washington. And so we're just challenging workforce challenges like everyone else. And so getting that tight turnaround is going to be a little bit challenging. And there's a significant amount of liability as it relates to just throwing these carts in the back of the truck. And so there are some nuanced conversations, but if council decides to move forward and direct staff to prepare an ordinance today, we look forward to having that conversation and working with them on specific language going forward.
Thank you. And thank you for coming tonight. I have a big concern about one part. I don't disagree with anything that's been said so far, but I want to call everybody's attention to the third paragraph from the bottom on page 46. And I'm just going to read this. It's only one sentence. There remains work to be done to confirm if this definition, that is the definition of an abandoned shopping cart, effectively complies with the ORS, or if the definition of abandoned mean every shopping cart off-site from the owner's premises, regardless of what it contains and who may be actively using it. The key there, regardless of what it contains and who may be actively using it. The concern I have is who is going to be responding to the hotline calls and how that person or persons are going to determine whether a shopping cart is in fact, quote, abandoned, end quote. And I'd like to ask Matthew, am I to understand that based on this paragraph, this sentence, that there's still work remains to be done to fine tune the definition of an abandoned cart, and whether in fact we're going to, whoever responds to these hotline calls is going to have the legal authority to say remove what they deem to be useless items in the cart that don't have any value, and who's going to make that determination, and whether we need to fine tune exactly what the definition of an abandoned cart is.
Yes, I mean, you highlighted a very important paragraph in the staff report that I have here, that definition is a little bit different, a little bit creative to address some of the concerns that we have. And using ORS 98.515, the verbiage requires a city ordinance to have certain verbiage in its own ordinance. And so some of that verbiage is that a business owner must retrieve a shopping cart reported through that hotline, and doesn't really provide any details on if the shopping cart is truly abandoned under that definition or not. In essence, it's been abandoned by the owner of the property, which would be the grocery store or the retailer. It's no longer on their property. The person using it doesn't have the consent. That property's been abandoned. And under that ORS, they may be required to retrieve that shopping cart. And so adding this definition and this verbiage, further defining what an abandoned shopping cart is some of the creative exploration that we've been doing and would continue to do if this council wanted to see a proposed ordinance come forward and provide some of that fine verbiage and detail that you're addressing, Mr. Mayor. So we address some of those issues and some of those dynamics where the rubber meets the road.
Councilor McLaughlin.
I want to add this information because maybe a year and a half ago, because of community cleanup, and we met at the pool, and I and Donnie Lewis went out and retrieved on that day at least 75 carts. And Captain Carrico accompanied us and explained the law that if there was something of value that could be used for survival, example, fishing pole, heaters, things like that, then we did not touch those. If it had a sleeping bag that was wet, if it had rotting food, other items, that's refuge, and in the ordinance, it explains that in detail. So you have to use common sense and what is a items that can be used for survival, and we don't want to take that away. But I was told by Donnie Lewis, Mr. Lewis, that in 1 year he retrieved 4,700 carts and returned them to the rightful owners. Now, sometimes those carts are laying in the perimeters. We have retrieved carts that there are places that are no longer operating. So those are turned over to some of the food banks, and they can use those carts that are unclaimed. So, and he just took another batch of 150 back this last week. So we don't have the visible problem just because of that one man volunteering at his own expense and time. And, our problem is not as severe as it really could be because of him. I'd just like to tell the community that, and thank you, Donnie Lewis, for all that you do to help our city stay clean and beautiful. And it all started from the community cleanup. And that's where this effort started.
Okay. Anybody else?
Does the word abandoned have to be in there?
That's a great question. No.
I
And
mean,
in
sometimes
fact,
we throw adjectives into things that change the whole process.
that's a really insightful point. The word abandoned needs to appear in this ordinance exactly once, and that'll be in the definition section if council wants this ordinance, and it'll be in the definition of the actual word that should have been used at the state level but wasn't for whatever reason, which is mislaid. It's going to be mislaid shopping carts, not abandoned.
When you say abandoned by who? It's a cart that belongs to a business.
Exactly right.
And somebody who stole it, now they've abandoned it.
Key is going to be
I'd leave that word out.
the cart. That's the issue.
So with respect to the contents, and I appreciate this is a discussion, and if council's direction is staff to proceed with developing an ordinance here for council's consideration, perhaps at its, I guess, September meeting, right? Because of the month of August being a hiatus. It's worth noting, since we have the Ms. Dalton here, the president of the Grocery Association, she indicated to me some of the practical realities associated with other jurisdictions that have implemented this kind of thing. And she can certainly speak for herself, but just to sort of get the ball rolling, functionally, the contractors that are offered to her member agencies, her member retailers rather, never have and don't really want to get started in the business of retrieving carts that contain anything at all. Is that more or less the case, Ms. Dalton?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the county council and city attorney Amanda Dalton on behalf of Northwest Grocery Association. I think that's fair. I wouldn't say anything. So we do provide just a little quick 5-second overview. As I mentioned, we do provide a contract service for both members and non-members. So we have some retail members that aren't necessarily grocery members where we pick up carts, both that we have just kind of found along paths that we know are typically used in communities. Once we become a little bit more familiar with them, and our cart retrieval folks find paths that they usually identify on. We do have a 1-800 number. It's 1-8855-CARTS. We also have a website that folks can go to and actually report the location of a cart, and then it gets added to the list for a sweep. We also, I will tell you, some of our most successful pickups have been coordinated sweeps with local governments. So be it a targeted cleanup, a one-time every quarter perhaps, or sweep through the community. We also have relationships with a lot of these carts end up either back at City Hall, at the local waste haul, MRF type centers, where we'll do a sweep so we can come back and get carts that are returned there that are still operable and running. But there obviously becomes a challenge when the cart contains personal items, but there's also some sanitary concerns from the cart vendor, depending on what types of items are coming. So we haven't had local governments really push aggressively on us retrieving carts with personal items. So that would definitely be a conversation I think we'd have to have with your local law enforcement and public safety officers. I will tell you, in downtown Portland, our cart contractors in partnership with law enforcement have participated in broader sweeps. But that's typically been our contractors coming in maybe the day after a sweep. And those can be very challenging situations. And And so it's not something that we ask to, a position that we ask to put our contractors, our employees in on a regular basis.
Thank you. Any other comments on the part of the council? Is there
Which
any?
is not only a houseless, homeless issue. There are people that roll carts up the street that have homes and they will abandon them. So it's just not isolated to one group, but all ordinances apply to everyone, all citizens.
That's right.
Thank you. Anybody in the audience who would like to comment on this issue?
I just want to sort of to underscore Councilor McLaughlin's point. The purpose of this ordinance, were to be considered by council for adoption, is in fact not applicable to any individual. It's actually applicable to the regulated entity, which is the retailer, right? And so this ordinance aims to regulate the retailer for their provision of these shopping carts. And the reason that the city can even really consider something like this, aside from this enabling statute by the state of Oregon, is the fact that abandoning shopping carts constitute a public nuisance, impacting our public health, safety, and welfare. And so again, this doesn't target any individual or any group of people at all. This simply regulates the retailers. So
Speaking of retailers, did you have something else?
Oh, that was it. That's all.
I believe we have one that would like to speak to the council. Please identify yourself and.
Hi, my name is Cody Miller. I'm the owner of the Dallas Grocery Outlet. A couple of things, because I just got this letter. First off, I want to start by saying, well said to Timothy McLaughlin, his first comment tonight about just getting the police involved and what we can do there. If we see a cart, I mean, at the end of the day, it's stolen property, like it is stolen. So that's where I think, we need to really start and address is they're out there in the public. But the thing I want to talk about is at the end of the letter, finding the business. I'm not a big corporation. I'm not Safeway. I'm not Fred Meyer. I don't agree to them get fined either, but I shouldn't be fined if my property is getting stolen from me. I'll do whatever I can to help this matter. I've listed my phone number from somebody from the city who has contacted me for carts that are missing. And I've reached out to my staff. Hey, let's go get these carts if I'm driving. If somebody reports it to me, we will do our best to clean up and get our carts retrieved. But at the end of the day, I just don't want to see myself get fined and other businesses here in town get fined.
Thank you. Do you have any comment on that? Anybody?
After you.
The ORS that we've referenced does have that provision for a fine. That is a dynamic that we've considered to make sure that we have compliance by a retailer and that they are being as proactive as Cody mentioned a moment ago. And so they're, under the potential ordinance, reported shopping cart will provide a retailer with the information to go get their cart. And if they do so within that timeline, there won't be a fine. So there is that element where if there's compliance with the ordinance and we work together to address the issue, fine won't really be necessary, but it is an important aspect to ensure that there's a mechanism for compliance under the ordinance.
Right. And Mr. Mayor, just to sort of address Mr. Miller's point, and thank you for sticking with us for this very long meeting. Just to come up here and give us your perspective on that. I think it's a valuable perspective. I do want to say that part of our consideration here, the city manager and I, in developing this proposal was to very carefully craft the definition of what it means to be abandoned. So the state statute requires the city, if it were to adopt an ordinance, to specifically include in the ordinance a requirement that you as a retailer shall retrieve a cart within 72 hours after you've received notice that it's been abandoned. And so that's why we're very thoughtfully trying to consider what it means to be abandoned. And that definition is up to us. It's not up to the state because they haven't defined it themselves. And so I think that one mechanism that you might be able to consider if this is the type of thing that goes forward and this council decides to proceed is, so long as, if you take a look at the staff report that's included in the packet, you'll see a couple criteria associated with what it means to be abandoned. If the cart, like let's say this happens and you get a notification, oh, hey, my cart's on the corner of 2nd and Federal. Well, you drive by, but you realize that as you drive by and you see it, oh, that's a grocery outlet cart, but it's full of somebody else's belongings. that, for example, that wouldn't necessarily meet the definition of an abandoned cart. And so you wouldn't have an obligation to retrieve it, which means you wouldn't get the fine. And so these are some of the conversations that we're having in our best efforts to try to come up with something sensible, something common sense, because ultimately, I think the objective of this ordinance will be through, in effect, of regulating your industry, is to improve, as we've said all along, the livability of our community. But the last thing I think city council would want, and they can all speak for themselves too, is to sort of disenfranchise a local business, right, for some of these issues that we're not offering an opportunity for the business to abate on their own. And so I think that the state statute is very poorly drafted, but it provides the city with an opportunity to do something interesting and good. And I think, for what it's worth, Mr. Mayor, I would support council's direction to staff to proceed with presenting an ordinance for council's review.
Okay, anybody else in the audience would like to comment on this? Okay, I'm sensing that there is general support on the part of the city council to do something with this particular issue. I think we need to do a little bit of work on the definition of an abandoned cart, and also some consideration about the gentleman from Grocery Outlet that is concerned about the fine. So I understand now that the staff should have sufficient direction to come back to the council in September, addressing those two issues with an ordinance in regards to abandoned shopping carts. Does that summarize everything?
Yes.
As far as you guys are concerned? Okay.
I think it does. My only comment there, Mr. Mayor, is that staff is always looking towards the upcoming council agendas to manage the number of items that we have, to avoid as often as possible meetings that go till 9 p.m. at night. And so I'll be sure to take a look at what we have on the docket for September and bring back something as prudently as possible.
Well, and if we find out our September docket is overwhelming, I would suggest that we consider second meeting in August, rather than stay here till 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. So I'm sure you'll be looking at that issue too.
Of course.
Okay, any other business to come before the city council? Have we got through everything here? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Anyway, it's got
The Darpins.
Daniel.
Could have got my own.
Long time since I've had a babysitter texting me, come get your kid. I didn't even. She's like, it's time for my
Just
kids to
give me
go
1
to
second.
bed.
Pack up my bag.
Just join the bathroom.
I just didn't want you to run out. I'm tired.